She started.
Oh,
Perfect.
she's up. Ah.
Good? Good. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Today is Friday, September 27th at 8:35 a.m., and we are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education. We are meeting at the Grandview Technology Center at 1591 Jordan Avenue in Provo, Utah, and we will begin with a roll call. Jennifer Partridge, Board President.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Vice
Melanie-
President, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. Oh my gosh. I'm Vice President. Acting as President today. That's
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Oh my God.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Lisa Blaze, Board Member.
Okay, thank you. And we do want to excuse Board President Rebecca Nielsen, who could not be here today, and welcome our other guests, and thank our technology people for the work they did to set this up for us today, and Bonnie for all of her support as well. Do we have a motion to start our study session?
I move we start our study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Van Wagenen. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Hales. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are now in study session. We will begin with our board handbook training, and we'll turn that over to Melanie.
Okay, so Rebecca and I have been working on the board handbook, and so the next, you can go to the next slide. So I changed a lot of red.
Awesome.
This is what was in there. So all-day meetings are usually held 2 times per year, once in late September or early October, and in mid-March to mid-April. The meeting may or may not be in addition to established 2 meetings per month. The September meeting usually focuses on the annual audit report and state assessment scores. The winter-spring meeting usually comes after the end of the legislative session, and most often focuses on the budget development based on the latest information regarding the state allocations from the coming year. All-day meetings can be best described as extended study sessions. They are public meetings and frequently will have a media presence. Agendas are developed well in advance and may consume the better part of a full day, usually a Friday. Business meetings can be added to the meeting as needed. Does that sound okay?
Gina's got a hand.
Yeah.
I would just like to publicly thank you for changing that from a retreat to an all-day board meeting, because everybody thinks we're having massages and drinking margaritas, and it's really just an all-day
really
meeting.
not. So, yeah. So this is some of the updates that we've been doing on the board handbook, which we're almost done with. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Anyway, next slide. So public comment and board meetings. I'm going to just have like 3 slides, and these are some of the highlights from the policy, which is in there. So board meetings are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the business of the schools, and therefore are not public meetings, but are meetings held in public. Time to address the board is dedicated for suggestions to the board for improving district services, including suggestions regarding district policy. Persons with concerns in one of these 4 areas, rights of individuals with disabilities, concerns regarding learning materials, cases of alleged sex discrimination, and sexual harassment complaints are encouraged to seek assistance from the superintendent's office in identifying appropriate procedures. So those are things that should not come to public input. Next slide. Board meetings. Let me get to my own next slide. The board strives to practice civility and respectfulness and holds similar expectations when receiving public input. Public outbursts and inflammatory or defamatory comments do not model the appropriate behaviors for the students we serve. Time to address the board may not be used to air complaints concerning bidding, contracts, employment, or personal issues, to criticize or defame district employees, or to make complaints for which other avenues for appeal exist. Next slide, please. Time to address the board may not be used by employees or their representatives to circumvent formal communication channels, or establish grievance or negotiation procedures. The following guidelines shall govern the conduct of the audience participation. Signups to address the board are on a first-come basis at the board meeting using the public input submission form. Individuals wishing to be heard shall be asked to provide in writing their name, address, and issue to be discussed to the secretary of the board. Individuals wishing to be heard shall be first recognized by the president. Individuals wishing to address the board shall begin by stating their name and address. And I don't know if we see, so. Public comments are welcome. You can go to the next one. Public comments are welcome during the board's monthly business meeting. The total window of time for public comments will be up to 15 minutes and the duration for each agenda item, with individual presentations limited to 3 minutes each. If several patrons wish to address the board on related issues, a spokesperson should be appointed to make one presentation rather than several, with a time limit of 5 minutes. The board may schedule other meetings to receive public input on specific issues, and the board will take no official action in response to public input during the business meeting, but follow-up will be made if needed by the superintendent and the board at a later time. So those were just some of the highlights from that policy. Any questions?
And a lot of these things are on the form that the patrons fill out so that they have all of that information to know what they can and can't talk about and those kinds of things.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. All right, now we will move on to our construction update. We'll turn it over to Devin.
Okay. I actually have Westland here. Just getting the presentation up.
And for those of you giving presentation, we got a mic at the front here. And because we are on YouTube, we ask that you use the mic. So,
Sounds good.
thank you.
Sorry.
All right.
So we have a quick just progress update on Timpview, and then a discussion on the changes that have been made to prep for the next phase of the project.
Let's see. Okay, next slide. Okay, so right now, this picture right here is showing the softball field and the state that it's in. They finished up the detention pond right here. So this is a huge gravel pit that's basically just going to retain all the water. And then they've started all of the dugouts. We've got the footings foundation. Your backstop is in there. And then your batting cages and bullpens are being poured. You can see the mow curb there. And then they've been setting, they're getting ready to set all of the outfield fence line. So they're getting close to putting in that other gravel lands, which is part of your storm. Still anticipating to throw down the sod end of the month, so end of October, 1st of November, so that the softball field will be ready for next spring. So that's, if you go back one other one, sorry. And on the other side, we have the parking lot. So you have the south portion of the parking lot that we're fencing that off so that the teachers can occupy that. And that will be next Friday, the teachers will have access to parking there. As well as they're prepping the additional parking lot so that we can get paving done this fall. It'll still be construction access through there until we turn over the rest of the project, just for deliveries and things like that. But we want to get the asphalt in before the winter happens so that it doesn't delay coming into spring. So that kind of shows you the site progress. If you go to the next slide now, this is showing the dance. So on the upper right is your dance and fitness. The joists have been set over there. And we're waiting for the deck, which is part of one of these changes, but the deck is supposed to be delivered on the 3rd, so next Thursday, and they'll continue drying it in and going from there. This is your elevator shaft right there, and then the stairwell, and then wrestling room is over here. So this is your wrestling room. The masons have topped out, so they're done, and they're pulling their scaffolding down. And today, the steel guys are going to be setting beams in the wrestling room so that we can get that 2nd floor slab going. So that kind of shows you some progress on that. Oh, and then the gym, the north gym has the roof on it, and the skylights will be installed here soon. So a lot of progress inside that north gym, and I think there's some pictures on the next slide. So this is your north gym right now. Masons are done. We have mechanical rough is in, electrical rough has been going, and the acoustic insulation has been sprayed. So you can see that here. These are your skylight openings. We just have them boarded up until we get the final skylight set. So painters should be rolling here in probably the next month. We'll get a lot more electrical in and different things like that, and then they can start. So let's see, next slide. Okay, so this is getting into some of the changes here. This is the PR 95. So some of these you have already been approved. Part of it, the storm drain, the blue is showing what was originally pre-PR 95 and in anticipation of the upcoming phase. So this is what, the next phase would be if your auditorium were to be built on that parking lot, and then CTE wing. So working with VCBO and kind of coming up with different plans of all of this storm drain that was originally called to be, it was maybe 4 feet deep or so, somewhere in that range. And if you were to put a new building on, you'd have to tear out all of that. Working with them, they came up with a good idea of rerouting it outside of the building footprint and deepening it. So the orange line is now what PR 95 shows. So the only portion that could be under a building is that little leg there, but it's deepened up. And the cost to deepen it is you're going from that kind of safety factor of 4 feet, you don't need trench boxes and things like that, safety side of it. As soon as you go deeper, you're required to have a trench box and different things like that, so that it makes it so the safety on it, it's just a little bit higher and more material, things like that.
A lot more time consuming as well.
Yeah. So that's where that 200,000 came in, is just deepening that storm drain.
Can you just, I'm
Yeah.
construction illiterate.
Sorry.
What does PR 95 mean?
That's just
Oh.
a change.
Oh,
A change, yeah,
okay.
sorry. And what it basically is the PR 95 is looking forward from what was originally designed in Timpview, having that kind of the dance and classroom wing, and getting it ready for that future phase of putting an auditorium on that end.
So this is all prepping for your next phase.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't have to rework, you don't have to tear anything.
Give him the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
It eliminates the need to redo your storm drain for the next phase. So it's all preparatory. And as part of that, while it did have a cost to it, as we were combing through and just evaluating what it would have cost to redo this in the future, your savings is around $550,000 by not having to do this in the future. So it costs you a little bit now, but it's saving you a lot in the future, plus the time that it would take to reroute that. And as we're looking at that, that's just the cost for just this storm drain, because you would have had to do this anyways. There would have been no other way to reroute this. So to be able to capture that right now, there's some huge savings in that.
Yeah, thanks. We can go to the next slide, or we can just talk, if you want, on that great western landscape. Some of the thought there was also to remove some plants that are close to the building that in a year or two, whenever you start that next phase, would be removed. And so there's some savings there by just putting cobble back instead of plants that are gonna be removed. Not saying that when you drive up onto the building, there's still a lot of plants, so it still looks presentable, but it's just removing strategically certain areas that you're not wasteful in the future. So the next slide, this one shows, kind of giving you a rundown of where this is. This is going to be the new dance and fitness that's being built right now. Wrestling, that's your gym. So wrestling room up there. And then this was, or is, the new entryway, the vestibule, and then it had the kind of grand canopy, and that has been removed as this PR 95 so that when you do that new auditorium, you're not tearing down all that structure. So a lot of that, and what VCBO has done is added some skylights so that in the future when you put a new building there, and before you'd have these windows in this face, but now it'd just be a dark dance room. So added a bunch of skylights so that you have daylighting coming into it. Part of that though is by putting this auditorium here, you have to increase the size of the joists in the deck so that the snow, because it's basically if snow were to fall down onto it, that load needed to increase to beef it up. So doing that right now, you're in that $200,000 to do that. But what it does is it saves you in the future from having to tear off all of your roof, remove that deck and that joists, and then your new dance floor that was there, you're either protecting it or replacing it as all of that. So for the future, we're looking at, you're adding about $380,000 to this phase, but really you're millions, $1 million plus, who knows, you know, like when it comes down to it, you'd still pay for that new added joist and deck, but you're losing all of that on the inside, that new dance floor and space, the programming space that you guys would want to have and need, you'd lose all of that too. So one of that though, we're working through, we've had a lot of materials that have been bought so that you don't have the escalation, and now this is kind of where this is changing, there's materials already on site, so the credits are hard to come by, like, because of that. One of them is our roofer, and all of that is getting removed as part of this PR, some of that canopy, but the materials are already on site. But there's a couple roofs, like the Thunderdome entry and that vestibule roof, that need to be replaced, and I think are wanted to be replaced. And those changes are around that $40,000 mark. But we have that material and we have that labor in here. So we're working through those with the roofer to get those credits to make that $40,000 go away. So you might not have a huge credit on materials and things, but we're almost trying to horse trade to get them to do added scope since that material's already on site. So trying to see how we can save with what's on site to help get the district a little bit further on other areas, I guess, within the school. Yeah.
The other part of this is you have your mechanical room right here. Originally, it's shown to vent outside the window, so you're pulling your fresh air in, outside the wall. With the new building going in right here, it had to be turned, and all of your venting and your fresh air comes in through the roof. So there's a big mechanical rework in that area, and to go through the roof, we had everything on site to go through the walls. Now we're having to change. That's where your mechanical penthouses and rework is that cost right there. One other item that we've been working through and have been talking with Devin about a little bit is you've got the rework on this outside wall where that's going to get buried. Originally it was shown as stucco, which is pretty costly to do. So we're still sorting through a few things to make that look good for the few years that it'll sit like that, but not put a whole bunch of money into it. So we're still combing through, working through that. We just kind of threw a number in there. We've got a metal panel number on there, but we're looking at possibly painting, which could be cheaper. So there's a few options that we're looking at there that it'll still be presentable for a few years, but not have a huge price tag associated with it. And you don't have to throw it away when we do the next phase. So just to save whatever we can here. Any questions on this? I think as far as prepping for your future phases, it does seem like we're spending some money right now, but you're saving huge in the future. To go in, we've had a few projects where we've had to go in and beef up trusses after the fact. It's not easy. It's not cost effective.
Yeah, I do have a question. First of all, thank you for being thoughtful about what would need to happen for the next phase, so we aren't ripping a lot of things out. So the vestibule, we're changing the entrance. I'm just curious, once that auditorium is there, is that still going to be an entrance and it's just gonna look different, or is the main entrance gonna switch to a new place?
Go to the next slide, sorry. So this is what your new vestibule will look like right there. So the red will go away, and then this kind of grade will stay. I believe that will somewhat get reworked because your next phase will shift where the admin goes as well.
Oh.
And so that kind of will change, but you still need to have kind of that defined front entry. I don't know for sure. I haven't seen completely that final drawing, but it limits a lot of that. So that far, kind of the right, that red there, that's where your commons is and the auditorium for sure. So they might have to switch just how it is. I don't know for sure how that vestibule works in, but.
Okay. Lisa?
Yeah, I think my question is more for the board to remind me, where are we in terms of really having a next set of plans? Just because whenever I hear them talking about how careful they're trying to be about, future changes that would otherwise have to be made, et cetera, I guess I just wonder, without really knowing exactly what those plans look
Demon's
like.
got
We actually will have a full set of plans by the end of the year.
Great, okay, thank you. Yeah,
They're
that's-
working right now on finishing up the plans for the cafeteria
Mhm.
remodel and the mechanical rework that they've got to do, but they are also working on the full set of plans for the
Thank you.
new additions.
Yeah, and VCBO has been great to work with on keeping us like, hey, this is what is anticipated, so that we can work hand in hand, like knowing what needs to stay or how we can kind of clean it up and help it look good. So like this one, that south wall there, or south of the commons, right now when you go out there and look at it, it's that white and orange and blue stripe there. But that's what Mark was talking about, that the plan showed some stucco, which is, it's a little bit more expensive, so we've been working with VCBO to come up with different options of what still looks good, but shows that you guys, the district, is thinking about how you're spending the money, and you're conscious of that, so that the future phases, it makes sense, right? And so that's kind of where we've been working through different options, whether it's the paint or some metal panels here to kind of make it, to clean it up, but still show there's some savings. And then all of these windows here are now infilled with block or metal panels, and that's so that, when you put the auditorium there, you're not putting in a lot of windows, but then tearing them out. And by doing that, your savings of just the windows is $90,000. And then the masonry infills, some of removing those pillars and different masonry that was there was a savings of $45,000. And he bought the joists, the old joists that had already been procured, for $35,000. So there's some savings there, and then some of the steel on that canopy at $14,000. So there's been total credits of about $180,000 right now. So yes, there has been some spending, but there is some savings in there too. But the long-term, what you're saving when this future phase comes is, it's a whole lot more than what's being spent. I guess next slide. So these are some changes that are out there that Devin wanted us to go over. So the vestibule, that's one of the roof changes that they sent out, and we're looking at some of those credits to make it where the materials are already on site, let's shift it. So that one, we're working through to make that one go away with the roofer. The south gym, that's where the building was, the existing old academic wing was, and the new south gym. It gets confusing on all of that. You couldn't finish a lot of this footings underneath it and helical piers, different things like that, until that building was removed, and then you had to beef it up, add on, and structurally to make it work. There's about $4,500 there. That south access road on near the pavilion, that landscaping there, there's no change on that. There's been some other PRs way back when, so that one, there's no cost on that one. The Thunderdome entry roof, that was another roof that we were talking about. Let's see if we can shift some of those materials and labor so that that one can go away as well, and you're getting more 30-year roof on your building. And then the PR 92, the phase 2 changes, were in that range of the 415,000. So that includes some costs and credits total, but that's kind of what we just went through, all of those different ads, credits, and things like that. Then the RFI 491, it's the parking lot to sidewalk grade. There's 25,000. What happened there is the city, if you look down by the tennis courts, your sidewalk is right next to the road. The city it requires a buffer zone of like 6 feet landscaping in between, but doing so, it makes it so that your slope up to the parking lot is steep. And so this is adding almost a little retaining wall type thing to break that grade where it lessens it up. So there'll be a curb wall around there, and then you'll have cobble going between the parking lot and the sidewalk. So the city, by shifting that sidewalk, it made it so your slope basically steepened, if that makes sense. And then the landscape changes for future, that's what we talked about, by removing some plants that make sense and just having cobble there for the future phases of a credit of 15,000. And then that temp egress that is in the computer labs, that one is around that 36,000 that the fire marshal required 2 forms of egress out of there. So that kind of gives you a rundown of where they're at.
So as of right now, this is what we anticipate as far as the changes. As Dev and I meet weekly to discuss this is what we're seeing. We're so close to the end on this project of this phase. Do you have a question?
Yeah, first is thank you. This is so helpful. Really quickly going back to the sidewalk and the 6-foot buffer zone, I just want to make sure, I just want to clarify how that communication process, so it does sound like you talked with the city and got feedback from them on what they wanted done on the sidewalk there.
It's kind of a voluntold.
Okay.
The city said, we need this buffer,
Okay.
and the rework happened, so, yeah.
That's great.
So if they come back for impact fees, there's 25 grand you can talk to them about. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Awesome.
So not related to these costs, I was just wondering, can you explain what's left on the current phase? And also, the kids really want to know when the commons is going to be opened up as part of that.
Yeah, so if you want to go back just a couple slides, probably towards the beginning, a little bit more, let's go to, okay, this is a good one. So kind of where that crane is, that's where your mechanical room is, but it's the second floor. And the commons is fed from that mechanical room. So all of your air moving in there, the fire marshal won't let you have occupancy in the commons if there's no air movement, basically. So until we can get that roof on and the mechanical units fired up and going, we can't tie any of the commons air into it. And so we're still pushing to dry it in, get it fired up, but it's like a February is when we're, yeah.
So right now, they're setting the still for the floor in that mechanical room, which will be poured, I believe it's next week, or the 11th. We'll set the air handlers in that room after that reaches its strength, which is typically 5 to 7 days. Then we can throw the beams on top and roof it. At that point, our mechanical guys are hooking everything up. So if we can have that turned over after the first of the year and have air flowing, then we can open up for kids to come in and do that. The biggest thing is just the fire marshals wanting airflow going through that. It has to be a conditioned space. And right now, we can't condition that air because it all feeds from this particular mechanical room, which is tough because it's ready to go.
Yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah.
Gina?
It's actually for Devin. Where are we getting the money?
For this,
Yeah,
it will
it's
be,
all part of that.
It'll be part of the project and then some fund balance, yes.
Okay, thanks.
We'll be talking about it again today when we get to large purchase request, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you
Yeah,
guys.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
So much.
Okay, wow, we are ahead of schedule, good job.
Do we have more construction?
Yeah, we have more
before
Do we
construction.
have more? Oh, okay.
We're not really
Sorry.
ahead of schedule, sorry.
Okay, no, just kidding. Okay, Devin, keep going then.
So we have, you can take control again, Bonnie. Oh, Cade. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So we have still the shoreline. Shoreline is about 95% done with the punch list. The furniture that we ordered after the teachers moved in and discovered that they needed a few other things that will be here in the next few weeks and installed. They're still working on a few issues, but for the most part, the school is done. I mean, they're still working on the rest of those punch items, and they get rid of 5 and maybe add another one. So we'll get that building will be done very soon, and hopefully everyone will be excited about it. And then Wasatch, we're still looking to be on time. I'm hoping for some news soon on all of the equipment. But right now, with the receipt of the panel for the electrical that they got last week, they've actually been able to spend this week getting all of that installed and prepped for when the switchgear is received. And then as of last week, the ship date is Tuesday on the 1st. But the last one was a ship date of the 20th, and they got it the 18th. So we're still hoping for an early arrival. I'm an optimist. Well, I'm a realistic optimist. I will be happy when I actually get confirmation. But right now, we're in really good shape on Wasatch. We've done a few changes for those of you who were on the tour. Originally, they had the I-beams throughout the building exposed. Those are not going to be exposed any longer. They have redone the I-beams so it's drywalled, painted, so it'll have a lot nicer finish look. The change orders for the railings and the stair rails and the guards, those all went through and they should all be installed on time. So Right now, a lot of everything hinges on the receipt of the electrical gear because they have to temperature monitor the building so they can get floors regulated and, you know, elevators tested and everything. So right now, a lot of that will be determined on if that equipment is received. So, any questions on any of the other projects? We still are a few minutes early.
Wow, I'm shocked we don't have more questions. Good explanation. Okay, great. Well then, with that, we'll move on to item number 6, starting with our lovely series of many policies. We'll turn it over to Wendy.
So the first set of policies are going to be done by Lisa and by Gina, so I'll let them take it away since they are tied to the Board of Education.
Great. I'll take the first one. Is that okay, Gina? And then you go. Okay, so the first policy is, I think let's start by looking at policy 1005, and there's a draft. You'll see the draft there. And this is, without addressing potentially other things in this policy, I only looked truthfully at the close schools and change school boundaries specific short paragraph because we needed to update and put in a policy that brings us in line with current legislation around this process. And rather than try to merge the policies, I just put in parentheses a reference to the other policy. So that's it on this one. And then when you go to policy 1450, this is the model policy taken from just the suggestions made after the legislative session. And hopefully people have had a chance to read through it. I don't know if anyone has questions or comments about it. Puts us in line with what is required if we want to or need to close schools or change boundaries. This does not address the issue of creating a new district, which there was a special legislative session over the summer, and there were some changes made around that, which could be readdressed in the next session, but because that is a separate thing to me than closing a school or changing a boundary, we did not incorporate that into this policy at this time.
Okay, do we have any comments on this policy? I have 2, but I was going to see if anybody else had it. Okay, so sorry, I would have emailed this if I had looked at it with more notice. That was my fault. I apologize. But on line 50 and also 63, it references the sample policy language of policy BEA instead of.
Yes.
I assume it's this policy number we need together.
Yes, that's
You
right.
got it.
Okay.
You got it.
And then I was confused on lines 81 and 82. I don't understand what that means, so I don't know if there's a typo there or I'm just not very good at understanding technical language. The process for approving a change to a school boundary must be completed no more than 60 days after the day on which the board votes to approve the change.
Yeah, so the way that I read that,
It's a tight turnaround, but
yeah, it just so they're gonna approve the change, and then the change has to happen no more than 60 days after that. Isn't that how you read that?
Yeah.
Like I don't.
And actually, when I
Isn't
read
that-
through that, it looked up, if you look above at all of the steps involved in sort of approving the change, I mean, it sounds like it's saying you have to do the thing 60 days after you've done the thing. That's why that's
Okay.
confusing to me, but
Yeah.
I don't know why that language was put in, and I don't know if we
It's
need
what's
to keep
confusing me
it.
is the process for
Yeah.
approving sounds like the part about approving the change. It's like, is it the process for implementing?
Yeah.
Yes,
for
that's,
actually
I think that's what, I
yeah.
think it's that it's approving the change and then the actual boundary change has to occur within 60 days.
What if we said the process for implementing a change
Yeah,
to a
that we
school
could-
boundary must be
We can definitely do
completed
that.
no more
That
than
makes more
60 days
sense.
after it was
Does.
voted?
Okay, so I'm hearing this. and
Use your
it's-
mic, please, Terry,
Oh,
for our YouTube. viewers.
I'm hearing this, and in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, we changed the boundary, but then all of a sudden, in 60 days, kids have to go to a new school?
I know, that's.
That doesn't make sense, because it takes a lot longer to do that than 60 days.
Is it to implement the process of changing it for the
Sort of
Yeah.
following year?
formalize the
Or
boundary
formalizing
change?
it?
And I don't remember this being
Sounds
in
like we
the
need to
state
check,
law.
we need to check the statute on that and see if that was part of statute or
I
just
have a
part of the
draft with
sample.
I mean, it's down in that code, but I'll find that, yeah.
Okay.
That's great feedback. I think we should make sure we're clear on that before we
Before we
vote on
vote?
it, yeah.
I think we just send it back to policy committee
Okay,
and they can
yeah,
address it. We're
sorry about
meeting
that.
on Monday, so we can
No, don't be
address
sorry.
that and.
I'll find that code, which code?
And then
I
we'll
think
make sure we
it's
get some clarification.
This one.
I do think that we need to be sticking with the law, the statute. So if the statute is unclear, I'm afraid we're going to have to also be unclear. If we change it, then we're gonna be in problem, we'll be in trouble, because we're not.
We're gonna be
not-
So we need to-
testifying before
Yeah,
the legislature.
right. So
need
I
double
think we do need to look at it to clarify for our own purposes, but yeah, I think we need to make sure that it's clear, but also that we're in line with what the statute says.
Okay. Looks like we weren't voting on this one today.
No, we're not. It was
So-
just a first reading anyway, so we
Okay,
should be
perfect.
okay.
My turn?
Yeah, go ahead, Denise.
All right, so I had 1509 and 1529, which are the updated superintendent and business administrator dismissal policies. Really, this is just bringing us in line with the state statute, just like most of these other ones. And if you looked at it, you would just see it just clarifies a couple of things and updates, like how they want us to do it. Like it added for no cause, place superintendent on leave or pay, so we can do that instead. It's the same exact changes for the superintendent, were the changes for the business administrator as well. I just want to clarify that we currently have no plans to dismiss our business administrator or our superintendent. On some nights, I think they would wish we would dismiss them because it's been long nights lately, but we have no plans to do this. We are just updating to make it current with state statutes. So you can read it there. Hopefully, I just basically took it straight out of the USBE model policy. So, are any questions on that I can't answer because I didn't write the USBE model policy? Okay, that's all
Okay.
I've got.
And that one we're voting on those today. Okay. All right. That's it for that series, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So Wendy.
Yeah,
series
I'm
4000.
gonna take over the screen if that's okay, Bonnie, that might be easier. Oh, sorry, Cade, thanks. I'm taking over the screen if that's okay. See if it will let me. 6198. So we put these into series just to make it a little bit easier and so that we could actually create a presentation for each thing and then put that into board docs. And we just thought that might be a little bit easier. Bonnie and I were trying to figure out how to manage all of the policies. So our 4000 series, that this is a policy 4151, interscholastic athletics and activities. This is just an update to our current policy. And if you look at the policy on lines 13 and 14, we just struck out Region 8 Board of Managers because with the region realignments that happen every 2 years, we don't know what region we're gonna be in, and our high schools are in different regions, so that didn't make any sense. So it's just based on UHSAA protocols, and then we added language in lines 17 and 18 that you'll see that kind of opens up that we have to do a report on basically how many students of each gender are participating in athletics, and we just added those lines so that we could push open for this procedure 2 that's going to be added. So the next slide is, this is the procedure that's coming through, and it is an additional procedure as required by UHSAA. It does want us to compile an annual report categorized by gender. It does define what those are. It wants us to have our participation numbers, both by sports that are separated based on gender, as well as co-ed sports, and then looking at how many males and females are participating in those co-ed activities. Also the spending amounts, so that we're pretty transparent about that we're trying to follow Title IX, and also comparison of facilities for practice and competition. If you're always moving, for example, your girls' sports to off-site locations for practices and your boys' sports get, you know, the main gyms and things like that, then they're gonna wanna see some sort of rotation of that. And then the school's efforts to comply with Title IX requirements as part of that. I would, if there is, I don't know what my phone is doing, but Siri's trying to help me for some reason. Additional procedure also says that if there's a discrepancy of more than a 10% difference between male and female participation rates in gender-designated sports, the school must submit an action plan to address the discrepancy. I would really like us to have that report produced by each of our high schools go to Assistant Superintendent Daryl Jensen, and he would review it with school leadership. And then if there was something where we needed to come to the board to try to equalize or create greater equity between, say, programs or facilities or something, then that's something that we would bring to this entity and make sure that that's happening. So our recommendation is that the policy be adopted in business meeting with those changes. Do you have any questions or concerns?
I had a question.
You bet.
Co-ed sports, I think the only one is going to be esports, right?
No, swimming is co-ed, football's co-ed.
Cheer?
Cheer is co-ed.
Cross
Cross-country is
country and
co-ed. There's quite a
track.
few. Track is co-ed.
Well, no, because in
Kind of run it as
state
girls and
cross-country
girls,
meet,
right?
they separate them by gender.
Yeah, same as swim.
Yeah, they do. Well,
They
football,
don't-
but football is a
compete
co-ed
together.
sport, so you can have girls
Yeah.
on your football team.
I was just trying to remember all the different sports that,
Yeah.
but most of them are separated.
Football, cheer, and what? Drill. We don't have drill, but yeah, if we did. I believe those are your only three that might be co-ed. Wrestling has girls wrestling now.
They have separate
They're separate.
competitions
Uh-uh.
now. Didn't used to be, I mean, in
Yep.
California, they compete each other.
Anything else? Okay.
Wendy, I had a question.
bet.
So it says in this procedure here, around line 23, 24, that at the beginning of each year, a report would come to the Board of Education, but you just said that you were thinking of report would go to Daryl. Would we still?
Oh,
get it?
yes, yeah, I would just put it in a board update.
Okay.
And then only if we were looking at like budgetary things or something like that, then we would
Okay.
have a discussion about it.
Okay.
That,
Just
that
wanna
was
make sure
more
your
my thought.
description
No,
match what it says here.
no,
Yeah, okay.
absolutely, I appreciate that, so.
Okay, but yes, then if there was a concern, then we'd talk
Yes,
about it. in the meeting.
absolutely.
Okay.
And obviously, when you get that report, if there's anything that you're concerned about and like, wait a second, something's not right, then we need to get that on a board agenda and discuss it, so. Policy 4155 is participation in sex-designated athletic activities, programs, and events. This is a new policy based on state law to designate activities as male, female, co-ed. They also use the term mixed. And that the designations that are specific to one sex cannot be used by the other sex. That would include the facilities, programs, or events. And it defines, it has a definition in the policy of what they consider to be how you're defining sex, how you're defining male and female, and that's all through model policy. And so our recommendation is to adopt the policy as it aligns with state law, and any questions or concerns that you have.
Is this basically for things like locker rooms, or, I
Yeah.
mean, because often they're using the same fields
Yes.
and things like
Yes.
that, right?
Yep. Yes,
Okay.
correct.
And I first read it and I was like, this seems so like harsh.
It seems a little bit
Like,
weird, yes,
okay.
but that would be why.
Okay, thank you.
So like, for example, if I have a locker room that's designated as the boys' basketball locker room, right, then it's for boys' basketball. So there are some schools that have very specific facilities that are tied to specific sports, or they rotate out based on season, so. Meg?
Do we like anticipate, I mean, looking at the first definition, right, of sex, chromosomal makeup and endogenous hormone profiles. I know we're following what state law is, but I guess I'm just noting, like, nobody really has those testings done, right?
No, but if they did, then we would, and they presented that evidence, then there are guidelines that would direct us into how we would designate that individual, so. Okay, I think that's it. We can move on to the next set. I don't even know if I'm going in order. What's my next? 5,000? All right, good job, thank you. All right, here we go. I know this is a riveting conversation, everybody. I know everybody's excited about policy. Okay, here we go. 5,000, these are my favorites. These are all Jason's. So there's 2 policies and then several procedures that go along, and the procedures are not requiring board approval, but we want you to be aware of them because they are ones that Jason and Rebecca and Boyd have worked really closely with the association on. So policy 5330, our current policy had a recognition of Juneteenth, and what we're doing is we're basically defining specifically when that would be celebrated. So if it falls on a Monday, it's celebrated on that Monday. If it falls on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or a Friday, the official district holiday will be the Monday prior. If it falls on a Saturday or Sunday, the official district holiday will be the Monday immediately following. That kind of aligns with how the state has been doing it in other entities. This year we had Juneteenth, I think, on a Wednesday, and we found out like most of the other districts were doing it on Monday. So, so it's just to bring us in alignment with that. Do you have anything you want to add to that, Jason? Sorry, let me make you grab the microphone.
No, you're all right. The only thing I would add is that was clarified. This is actually out of the language that the state uses.
Okay,
now.
gotcha.
So we took it straight from them too, as to how it would go one direction or the other.
Our district leadership recommendation is that we adopt the policy. Do you have any questions? Okay. Policy 5720, this is school employee firearm possession on district grounds. This is replacing our current policy due to new legislation. It basically states that the purpose of this is to encourage employees that are already carrying a firearm to participate in our specific program that allows them to receive annual training, to be part of this program. It provides them with liability protection if they participate in the program, and it provides them with a biometric safe to secure the weapon when they're on campus. They could not leave the weapon there. It's just if they don't want to walk around with it on their person. It still requires them to have a conceal and carry. They can't carry openly. And employees that are carrying are not required to participate, but the goal is to try to incentivize so that we're having individuals that are carrying in a very responsible way and that they know how to secure the weapon. It also allows us to know, because they're participating in this program, we technically, under old legislation, couldn't ask if a person was carrying. You still can't do that, but if this individual wants to participate in this, it gives us a better idea of who has a weapon in our building and what kind of training that they have available.
I'm just curious on that
yes.
one. How many, I mean, I don't know if you even know this, but do we have a large number of employees that would fit that pool?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a great question. We don't know. You know, on the offhand that someone has, you know, worn something where their gun is exposed, we have had to work through that on a few cases. So students have alerted us, or parents have alerted us that that teacher may be carrying, and then we have a conversation with them. But beyond those incidents, we wouldn't know.
Okay.
We did discuss that we do need to develop a specific procedure about how this would take place. So like, how would an employee indicate that they want to be a part of this? When does the training happen? How do we submit for those biometric safes and pieces like that? So we can do some work on that in our policy committee. But this, I believe, went into effect on May 1st under state law, and so we just want to make sure that our policy is in alignment with that that's already in effect. So, and then when we develop that specific procedure, we'll bring it to you for your review and make sure that you're aware of what that looks like. So if people ask you questions about it, you're informed. Any questions?
I was just wondering, this link that says House Bill 119, is that from this year?
Great question. I thought so. I think it is from this year. There was one this year that talked about, so there's several safety bills, so like 84 replaced 61, but 119 is specifically about this training process of having armed employees not tied to the armed guardians that are in House Bill 84.
But we probably should specify, because they will have a House Bill 119 in another
Every
year.
year.
that
So
will
we
be
wanna
something
add
different.
Well, what's gonna
2024.
happen
Or
is that
put a
should
link-
now
It will-
be in a
it will be-
statute.
They haven't made it into
in
a
a code,
statute
and
yet,
so once we
yeah.
get the code.
Yeah, once we get the
Yeah.
code, then we can replace that.
And then put a link to
Yep.
it.
Thank you.
But in our policy, on line 19, it does say as outlined in House Bill 119.
We'll
So we
make
either
sure.
need to
Mhm.
change that wording or specify what the year on
So
it.
it won't have to change.
Yeah. I'm curious, in line 20 there, it says, "The district is tasked with ensuring that all employees who carry a firearm on district grounds are tracked." I thought we can't know who that is, so how, do we need to change that language?
I thought go ahead.
I think the difference is that, going back to what Wendy mentioned before, people can carry without letting us know by law now. In this program, in this way she described it, we're asking employees to come forward to basically receive training, that type of thing. We will know those people specifically, but again, this is where the laws kind of conflict, because there is a law in Utah that allows anyone to carry anywhere without having to let someone know, as long as it's unseen. You know, so it's a great question, Jennifer. This was the model policy, again, that was sent to us by USBE. So we didn't make a lot of changes to this. We just put our logo and, updated that way. So this was written by USBE.
So I wonder if we need to change it, though, like, all employees who participate in this program
Yes.
are tracked.
I think that's a good
or-
suggestion.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah.
And so this is on our agenda to approve today, but do we want to?
Could we just say with?
You could just say
Can
with
you
that.
say
You could-
that, or
yeah,
do you feel like
either
with
one.
the other part you need to?
We can
Take it into policy.
certainly postpone it if you want to. I'm
What
good
do you
either
guys-
way.
I'm fine to just say with the changes we
Discuss.
discussed.
Yeah, because we know there's just two.
Okay.
But I'm grateful for that clarification, because I know we don't want a policy that's in conflict either with the law, so. It's interesting that in their model policy, they didn't discern those two situations, right? Like employee just carrying
Right. And not participating in the program.
in a concealed way without opting into this, and those who opt in.
I felt like I need to go in and look at it, because I think in House Bill 119, it does clarify
Okay.
that specifically, because I was confused about that as well, but I went back to the actual legislation, and in the legislation, it stated that it was the employees that were participating are the ones that report, and so you're correct. We need to make sure that we have that clarification in there, so. Okay, so this is just for review. Policy 5020, Procedure 6, hiring and training of extracurricular coaches. Just updated the procedure to ensure that our HR hiring procedures for coaches align with those for other employees, and ensure that specific training and background checks are required and completed in accordance with UHSAA rules and district policies, listing those out. What else do you want to add to that, Jason?
I think you covered it well,
Okay.
unless there's questions.
It was just providing some clarifying language to make sure that, that we have appropriate structures in place as we're hiring those coaches, so. Policy 5200, Procedure 1, drug-free workplace. Updated the procedures language here. Please note that the language acknowledges that employees may have and consume controlled substances that are legally permissible. I started looking at this after your question, Lisa, in policy committee about, well, that seems weird if these drugs are not allowed. In what instance would they be legally permissible? And as Jason and I were talking, people can have a medical marijuana card, for example, or maybe they are on a particular type of prescription medication that could be considered a controlled substance, but they need to take that for whatever reason, then that would fall under those legally permissible guidelines. But there's no required action from the board, but if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, and then policy 5320, procedure 4, which is salary level advancement activities for professional educator licensed employees. This was an updated procedure in collaboration with the association. There is an updated application form, which we included on board docs, which is form 2. Our hope is to digitize that in the future. Steve Reese is becoming quite the handy person with digitized forms, so we could do something like that so that all of it could go into a digital format. They also updated other documentation for credit approvals that happened in collaboration with PEA. So like if a teacher attends a conference, then they updated that, those particular forms. This procedure updates language with respect to approvals are coming to the MTSS district leadership team. Prior, we had a director of professional development under the teaching and learning department. Since we no longer have that position, then we needed to push that to our current structure. And then it updates the ways to earn credit and how to determine the amount of credit awarded. So it's just clarifying all of that, and it was a collaborative effort between us and the association. And there's several forms that then they submit for granting that approval for getting those things pre-approved. So anything you wanted to add, Jason?
Oh, good job. You covered it well.
Policy 5400, procedure 8, leave without pay. This is just an update to this procedure. You'll notice the very first paragraph in that is all in blue. Really just aligning our actions with stated procedure to ensure consistency and implementation. Often we have situations where an individual is out of leave. We don't want to let this individual go, and they have an extenuating circumstance. They're willing to take leave without pay. That's something that can be worked on in collaboration with HR and their supervisor, and we just wanted to put that into our procedure so it doesn't ever feel like, well, this person's allowed to do it, but this person's not allowed to do it, that it becomes part of our MO. This is just how we do things, and we're willing to work together on that. So there is no action required from the board. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can give a couple of examples on this. So when new employees come to work for us, we accrue a bank over time of leave. And so let's say someone comes and they're expecting a baby in the first year that they are employed with us. They wouldn't have enough leave if, for whatever reason, their doctor didn't allow them to come back until after 8 weeks. And so we would work with them to say we could do leave without pay for a short period of time to have you come back. We working with them, we already convert all types of leave to be able to use over that time frame, but then it still sometimes causes a short gap before they can be back. And of course, we're working with them and their doctor to try to make sure we do it in a way that helps the employee stay employed, but ensures us that they're going to be back in a timely manner.
Any questions about that? All right, I think that's the 5,000s. Am I at 3,000? I don't even know what I'm at now. 3,000s, thank you. 3,000 and 6,000, very exciting. Here we go. Oh, I don't want to share it, I just want to show it. Here we go. Okay. So policy 3225 is student notifications. I think maybe Jennifer, you were there when we were in JLC, and the state representative talked about they didn't like that most of the notifications that came from high schools came out through social media, and that students had to have access to electronic accounts to be able to access information about the school. So this policy is in alignment with state law. It's to provide students with notifications about important school events, both in electronic and non-electronic formats. I think our elementary schools try to do a pretty good job of that. But it does state in policy that if we are providing a Chromebook for the student, then we can utilize the electronic format. Also, it exempts emergency situations. Like, we understand, like, something comes up, then we're probably going to use an electronic notification. Questions?
I guess my question is moving forward, how, like, the spirit of the policy, how we work with our schools on this. I think the legislator that talked to us, his concern, and I've had it lately with my daughter's begging me for Instagram because, Mom, I
That's
want to
at the
know what's
school.
happening at my high school, and they post a lot of stuff on Instagram. And I'm holding out, not letting her have it yet, but it is frustrating that I will go on Instagram and tell her what's happening, right? And so I think I'd just like to see that we can have our schools work through that and, not have to rely on some of that social media to get the word out. And not that we can't also utilize it for those who are on it, but just even utilizing their video boards and their common areas and stuff more and things like that. So.
I also think as we're going through this website audit and helping and figuring out a way to, and eventually having a person that's going to help us maintain our websites, that's going to be a key piece of information that students could then use, particularly in middle school and high school. Right now, I feel like the website, depending on the situation, might be the last place I go to get some of the information that I need. And so we want to make that so it becomes your go-to place, that really is updated and helpful and has links to what individuals need, and we're trying to support that in a more effective way. So I think that will help. And I do think, like, when I think about student government at the secondary level and I walk into schools, they have their posters about everything that's happening, what's happening, what days, and I think they're trying to do some things. I think Timpview's a little tricky because of how they're under construction, and it's like, where do we put this, what do we do? And so, but part of this too is I don't know that our employees know about this. So a part of this is making sure that our principals and our teachers are aware that we need to try to create a situation where those notifications are occurring in multiple ways. And so we can do a better job of that for sure. Lisa, you wanted to say something?
No, it's a conversation with her. I was just thinking, like, what's so fun about the Instagram reels and posts is the spirit of the school that you catch from that. So I don't know how hard it would be, but when you look at a web page, if that banner that can kind of move right there could sometimes play some of that, it does give you more of a sense of being included in the action that you sometimes get from seeing social
Well,
media.
and if the school had like a big TV in a common area and could put some of those videos,
Yes.
like cycling through, so
Yeah.
those kids can see, oh, look, I was in that picture,
I
or
screenshot
whatever.
it and text it to Davey. Here's what you did. No. Look, you made Instagram.
You made
With your
Instagram.
dinosaur head. He's like, what? I don't even have Instagram.
I should know this, but do we have like those TVs that are rotating like information?
I don't know. I haven't
I
seen
was
them.
I was at Spanish Fork High School on Tuesday for my daughter's volleyball game, and they had it in the gymnasium, and it was just rotating things like things that are coming up, and it even had QR codes that you could scan, and it just, like every 15 seconds something new was coming on. But I thought, well, this was a good way for information just to go out if there was multiple
I
places.
don't know. Daryl, do you know if any of our secondary schools have video screens where they do like announcements and stuff in the common area?
I know, I was in Shoreline just.
Can you use a mic? Thanks.
I was in Shoreline just the other day, so I know Shoreline has it. I believe Provo High has it.
Yeah.
I've noticed one by the counseling center. I have not noticed one at Timpview, and that might be due to
Just
the circumstances.
But I'm just thinking if we had it in multiple places around the school, not everybody's.
Yeah, that might, Chad can probably talk to how many we have.
Probably better that Cade does this, but I know, yeah, you're right. Timpview does have a few, but not very many. Shoreline, we've got the one in the commons area. We've got the TVs in the lunchroom. We also have two outside the auditorium that are digital signage. We have very few others. I mean, Centennial, I don't think has any. Provo High has a few. We need to upgrade those, but they have several at Provo High. But yeah, we can work on getting the other schools done. In fact, Cade and I are working on that. It's just taking some time, so we'll get them done.
How about Independence?
Independence has some. They have two. They've got one in the commons, I think, or in their lunchroom, and then one in the front four-year.
Thank you.
No, Kate's saying there's three, so, okay, there are some independents.
Okay. Policy 3231, reporting substantial threats against a school. It's a new policy that aligns with updates to Utah State Code. States that adults who are employees or volunteers must report potential threats to school or district administration, to police or the state security chief. And that as soon as those individuals are informed, then we inform law enforcement and investigate collaboratively with that. So almost like a mandatory, becoming part of the mandatory reporting, like you don't get to just kind of pretend you didn't hear it or it's not a big deal. And I don't think we have problems with that with our employees. They're pretty astute about what's going on and let us know and keep us in the loop as to things that they're hearing. So our recommendation is to adopt the policy in business meeting. It does align with state law that's already in effect, but what questions or concerns do you have? Okay. Policy 3350 is procedure 1. This is just an update to definitions of gang affiliation and activity, particularly related to definitions of gang-related activities. And we used to have in our procedure really specific definitions of gang signs, gang clothing. It changes so quickly now that it's really just defined by school officials and they collaborate with school resource officers. And we just want to make sure it's generic enough that a person doesn't say, well, it's not specifically written that that's forbidden. It's like, well, if that becomes the new thing that you're slanting your belt this way, or you're wearing these socks, or now there's a certain type of Nikes, or whatever, that we can still act on that. So no board action is required. We just wanted to make you aware of the change.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
More for Daryl. Do we have a big presence of gangs in our schools?
I wouldn't say we have a big presence now. I mean, do we have a few younger kids that may be banging a little bit, right? But I don't think we have big gang issues.
In comparison to what I was dealing with in district case management in another district, it's not even remotely comparable to the issues, especially as a former high school principal that had a lot of gang issues. So. Policy 6800, school safety and security specialist. This aligns with state law requiring every school to have a school safety and security specialist. These individuals have already been identified. In most cases, they are our assistant principals or one of our assistant principals. We have received clarification that it cannot be the same individual as the armed guardian. And so as we implement the armed guardian program, we will have to separate those two individuals, so that creates another hiccup for us. And then really the purpose of the school safety and security specialist is they run our school safety meetings. They're coordinating all of the safety efforts at the school. They meet with Jason Garrison and collaborate with the district to respond to and problem solve situations as they arise. And so we've already had these in place for a year. It's just we wanted to create the clarification and put it into policy as we're trying to implement all parts of this House Bill 84 into our policy. So any questions or concerns?
Will you remind me on that? The district also office has to have a safety?
Yeah,
I
so
guess
it's
it's
Jason Garrison.
And then the armed guardian for the district would be someone different.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. So our armed guard,
Same.
we're already in the process of training those individuals at the district office. So as long as they can pass their psychological evaluations. They will. They're amazing. Okay. I had to have a little levity.
You're welcome.
Yeah, you have no idea who they are. None of them are in this room.
There will be signs.
There will be signs. Our recommendation is that we adopt the policy in business meeting. It does align with House Bill 84. It is in alignment with our current practice as well. So, policy 6800, procedure 1, it outlines the specific duties of the safety and security specialist. We are required to have one per school. The primary goal is to make sure that they are responsible for the safety of students and employees and really of the facility. So they're also helping us with all of the needs assessments that are taking place, working with Utah County Sheriff's Office on that, and then filling out that information and turning that over to student services so that we know what it is that we need to make sure that our schools are in alignment with the requirements of the bill, and also just, you know, just making us aware of things that we're like, wait a second, why is that happening? Why is that door not shutting right? Or, you know, they're just gonna be a lot more aware of those kinds of things because they're living in that building day in and day out, and so they can alert us to those things. So so I think it's a great idea. It has created a lot of consternation in our elementary schools that the assistant principal cannot be the armed guardian, yeah.
Can you remind me, this school safety and security specialist receives compensation for
They do.
that?
Mhm.
And is that something we had to find the money for ourselves, or did that come in a grant to
No,
us?
we do get a grant for the school safety.
Okay.
Security specialist.
Okay.
And it actually covers the cost.
We make it
Okay,
cover the costs, so they get as much money as we receive.
okay.
The same question again is link on the procedure.
Oh, you got it.
The policy has the links, but the procedure doesn't have the links to
Oh, I'll
the
put those in.
bills.
To the House
And then
bill.
down,
Okay.
line 39 and 40 and 41, 42, it says section 53G.
And you want it linked, oh yeah, we gotta do the
Links
links
to
in there. Yep.
those sections of state code. And then I noticed on line 36, so section 2 is all about the duties of the school safety specialist, but I think H is supposed to say district safety and security director.
What line is that, Terry?
36.
36.
It's
yeah.
number H. I think that's
Okay.
supposed to be district and
Okay.
not school.
I think you're right,
I think you're
actually,
right.
the district. Yep.
Yep.
Which is sort of covered by I, the
Yeah.
district.
So maybe just take out each.
And I is kind of vague, the district.
Yeah, so
What
maybe
is-
even if you put the district safety and security director, you could eliminate row
I.
37 and then
Okay.
just rename 38I
Yeah.
or whatever.
That's all.
Thank you.
Right on.
I love it that we have multiple eyes on this. I appreciate it greatly, I'm just gonna say. All right, I think that's it. Did I do all the policies? Are we all done?
Sorry, I
Yes,
have a question
please.
about the actual policy 6800.
Yep.
If you pull that up, in that second paragraph, the second sentence, the remainder of that paragraph is that sentence, well, not all, but I had a hard time parsing the sentence, and it may just have been that I kind of reread this when it was late. But I thought it was a little bit unclear for me what we were saying there. Does that make sense? Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
It says
I'm
they
just
will
pulling it up.
adopt policy and procedures regarding school safety and security specialists as state laws require, that each school has a specifically designated school safety and security specialist that is properly trained and works collaboratively with district and school administration to effectively carry out their responsibilities with regards to the safety and security of their school sites. So I just wondered, I know it's a small thing, but because we started out by talking about I don't know, for me, that was not super clear, but if everyone else reads that and knows what it's saying clearly, great.
It's a very long sentence.
Yeah, so maybe you just.
I just thought maybe we could parse it in a way, but I couldn't even think of how to do it, so it's not like I think I could do better. I just wondered if someone else had an idea of how to make that a little bit clearer.
I think we honestly just pulled it from state policy.
So someone at state policy
That's
likes
fine.
run-on
We-
sentences?
No, it doesn't mean we can't, we can make it better. We don't have to do it the way
Well,
the state
do
does
you
it if it's
understand?
not good.
No, I'm just wondering if it,
Okay.
I'm sitting here trying to, I think, let's take a look at it in policy committee.
Okay.
And let's, because I agree that, I think we need to do a little bit on that, but I think we can take a look at that. I'm happy to take a look at that if you would like me to.
Yeah, I think we
unless
could break
we
it up.
need to
into just
get this.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be
Sentences,
broken
yeah.
up in 2 or 3 sentences, and I think that'll help clarify it.
you'll need to, in business meeting, table it
Yeah.
so that you can put it to the next
Or
board
we
meeting.
could just,
It's really okay to table it and do it next time. It'll be super fast, and then you get it exactly the way that you want it. I think it's better to do it that way. Don't apologize just because there's lots of policies. It's
And-
not your fault, Lisa.
and we got less
Kinda
than 2
cause
weeks till our
trouble.
next board meeting where we
That's
can.
right. We got time. It's all good. All right, I think we're done.
Are
It's
we done?
policy.
No way.
We took even less time than we were.
I know.
So we're like
I am
super-
like
Well,
policy guru.
Too bad we can't like add more in there.
I know. Well, next time I'll know. I can double the number.
Keep going.
No, my problem is I can't keep up with,
So
we can't keep up with writing them.
Okay, so we're.
How close are we to be done with like this, all the updates?
We're never gonna be done, because then there's always something.
Well, close to 2024.
I think we'll be done by December. I think we'll be
Okay.
done before Christmas,
Fine.
if not earlier than that.
Okay.
So,
Just in time to start all over again.
that's right.
Oh.
Is it appropriate to move one thing up from later in the day to talk
think so.
about it now?
I have
think
no
so.
problem.
Do you think it would be okay to do the boundary and feasibility study
Sure.
update right now?
Let's do that. I think
Okay,
that sounds
so we're
great.
gonna go to C2 on our agenda, update on the boundary and feasibility study, and we will turn that over to Devin.
Okay, so we had our kickoff meeting with MGT last week. We talked about some of the questions that you guys wanted answered that we've talked about over the last few months. And so they submitted a request for a lot of different kinds of data. So I'm just going to tell you some of the data that they have been, they've asked for, so they can start evaluating and looking at some of the district as a whole. So they've asked for school information, and a lot of that is, every site's number, gross square footage, what type it is, how many acres, floor plans, and then they want to see what each room is being used for in each school. And I believe that Jason is working on, or no, Jared and Daryl are working on those. The student enrollment data, they want the current enrollment for each school by grade, and then historical, and then what the feeder pattern is, so which elementary schools go to which middle schools, and then attendance boundary data, so where students are actually going. So we got a lot of that information this week from Troy. He has a lot of the GIS capability within his TransFinder application, and provided me with a lot of the GIS maps of students and boundaries throughout the school district. So that is already well in hand and mostly all done. A current student list, they asked for a student data file. I have almost all of that already done. There's one piece of information I still need to add to it. They just want, so just a current student list and the enrollment at each of the schools.
So, personal information about our students?
There is no names, but
Okay.
they want to know addresses so that they can get
Okay.
a
Location.
map
So they
of
know
who's
where-
going to which school.
Okay.
And then information about whether they're special ed, multilanguage, and DLI, and gifted,
So
so they can see.
Nothing I guess it is personally identifiable because there's homes. But I think they cannot do what we've asked them to do unless we give them this information. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah, they wouldn't be able to evaluate the programs unless they knew what students are attending the programs and where they are in the district.
And this is not public knowledge.
No.
Will be only used within the district.
Correct.
So it's not going to be accessible by anybody other than them and us.
Correct, and they have an NDA in their contract as well.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask. And they pull that information and then they start reporting that in the aggregate.
Correct.
So they're gonna report it. So the reason they're asking for that individual information is because it's like, we're gonna break down the Provo feeder. We're gonna say, this is how many MLs there are. This is how many are at each elementary. This is how many are at the middle school. So you can start to see the trends as to where they're gonna move within the next few years and how that's working. So it's not going to be like, student one at this address is this. It'll put it into an aggregate format that we're just sharing that information so that they can aggregate that data.
The other piece of that is if, as they decide, or as they redraw boundaries, if that's what's done, they're not overloading one school with a certain
That's right.
population. So if there's a lot of multi-language learners in one area, that they would be able to split that. So splitting up that population so to not put too much weight on one school for a certain population.
And does their NDA then means that when they are finished using this data, it doesn't sit somewhere where someone
Nope.
else could access it or it could be shared?
And everything
outside of
is
their
on a secure drive,
Okay.
so nothing is sent by just a regular email. It's all part of a secure drive that you have to have a code to be able to get into, so.
And this also includes kids that would be out of district.
Correct, yep, it does have all of the out-of-district students on it as well. And then they are asking about capacity information, so how many students can fit in a school and what types, so they're going quite the gamut. I got quite a bit of that information from Student Services. They've been tracking that information for several years.
Hey, Devin, I have a question about capacity. Are you still going on about that? I
Yep.
can wait. I've noticed since being on the board that what the district has as capacity is not actually capacity at the school. So I'm wondering if that, and I know we were talking about aligning those. Have those been aligned? And I just want to make sure we're giving them accurate data.
So I think that's why we get site-level information, where you have classrooms of what everything is
Okay.
for, and then we have district-level information
Okay.
about, these are the grade levels, and this is the capacity that we have in each of the grade levels, because that's what they use for their choice
Got it.
information, and looking at the capacity to allow additional students in a school. So they'll take that information and work on it. They're willing to come and give status reports as often as you're needing it, but it will take them some time to start parsing the information that we're giving them, and it will take us some time to get some of the information that they're asking for. So most of the information should be available and to them just before fall break is
Thank you.
all of our deadlines. And then they're asking for a lot of planning data, so residential development, yield factors, which we're still trying to figure out what a student yield factor is. I have no idea. So we'll get that information, and then any kind of
Google.
any kind of spatial data, which we'll just send them the link to the county parcel map so they can kind of get an idea of what available land and what we own around that, so they can look at some of the properties that we have around the district and see if there's a better utilization for that. So those are the information pieces that we have so far. I'll send a message to the city GIS specialists and see if we can get some of the spatial data from a city view rather than a student view.
Thank you.
So right now, they're working on just evaluating the information we're giving them, seeing if they can actually open the GIS files that we're creating for them, and then go from there and see what we need to give them in addition.
Like like development and planning, maybe you said this and I just spaced it. They get that from the city?
The city,
right? Okay.
yeah, we'll have to provide information. I can get information from this, at least as much as they've got from the
Right.
city. I mean, we do know of a couple of new developments going in, but I don't know the timing, and that's not something that the district would have. That's something that
Right.
we'd have to get from the city. So,
Can we
Googling
also
you.
share with them the neighborhood boundaries? Because that's very specific to Provo.
if we have something that shows those neighborhood maps,
Yeah, I think it's just on the city's website, what
I
the,
think it's helpful.
somewhere.
we
that's a
can
good
provide anything to them
Yeah,
that we feel would be helpful in their determining boundaries and
yeah.
the best utilization of our schools and of our land, so, great idea.
The neighborhood maps didn't change with the
Correct.
redistricting with our,
No, they didn't.
No.
No.
When they did the district.
because they had to keep, that's kind of how they were
But they
doing
did rearrange which neighborhoods were in
which district,
districts.
right.
Yeah.
They combine.
But
Which
the
city
actual
council
neighborhood
district.
But the
maps
actual
did not
neighborhoods
shift,
did
to
not
my
shift or change.
No.
Okay.
So like recently, at the beginning of the year, they moved the university neighborhood into District 5. Not that, who's over District 5? Is Rachel Whipple?
Yeah.
I don't think she's over District 5, it's just the neighborhood was moved into District 5, if that makes any sense.
So any other questions? If you have any specific questions that you'd like to have addressed, send them to me and I can send them on to MGT because that is probably the best way to do it without my interpretation of what you're asking. If you give me the email, then I can send it to them and then they can ask for the information that they know that they can get that information with.
And this might, have we notified the mayor and the city council that we are going forward with this study? Because that might be helpful when we're trying to get data from the city. Then, and maybe we need to talk about that at our joint city council meeting.
We could certainly put that on the list of things to talk about.
I think that could be an email though, honestly, because we have already not much time. So I think maybe if we could preserve time for other
Yep.
things, I think an email might be good way to do that. I'm not the board president though, so.
Nina?
Jennifer?
You are
So not
acting
playing.
today.
No. So, and then,
Super board
I was curious if we could just briefly talk about, so that's what they're doing, but we're focusing on a couple of things we're wanting to look at during this year as far as our programs to assess that will be a part of when we bring it all together,
Yeah,
right? Can you
yeah.
remind us what
For
we're
sure.
doing on that end?
So one of the things that we want to really look at is our dual language immersion programs, and you're going to see us kind of talk a little bit more about that as we talk about the Dixon site. And just there's more information coming as I've been visiting with some of the dual immersion principals. And then also looking at our gifted and talented program and looking at access. Like, would these programs be bigger if we were providing transportation, for example? Can we afford to do that? What does, are there better locations for that make it more accessible? What are those barriers would be part of that as well? And then we also are looking at programs for our middle schools, 7th and 8th, in terms of gifted versus honors. I know Shoreline does a lot of pre-AP, so just trying to create some consistency. The state board has put rules in place about what is considered an honors or a gifted class, and so we also have teaching and learning at the secondary level that will start, and at the elementary level, to be honest, as well, to start looking at our curriculum notebooks to add components in that, because right now it's just left up to the teacher to determine what is gifted, and usually just means moving faster. And really that isn't in alignment with the definition that's provided by the state. So providing some guidance so that we have consistency across our schools. And it's not, we always want teachers to be able to bring in their individual personalities and their loves and whatnot into the classroom, but it also reassures parents if they know, doesn't matter what side I'm at, I'm getting a good education, and this is what I can expect from it, and what's going to occur there. So gifted and talented would be a big piece of that. We've had also defining honors at the high school level. What does that look like? Because sometimes it just looks like more homework. Or is it, what is the level of rigor that we're actually expecting, and what is the trajectory of that student? What do we want them to be able to do? Because ultimately, we want our kids to be taking AP and CE and CTE classes and things like that. So how are we creating that trajectory? So that's another piece. Can you think of anything else, Devin?
Those were the
Jason?
main ones.
Those are
that
the
we
main
were-
ones that we wanted to look at. So, Jason, Daryl, Jared, is there anything else I'm missing? Okay.
Any other questions?
I will email you about this, but just as a heads up, prior to a recent boundary change that affected where our students attend high school, it kind of made a more of an east-west, east-west divide, and I will email you about this, but since then I've noticed more issues, and people in the community have noticed more issues with the rivalry issues that we've had, not recently, but just it's intensified because we are now very divided, whereas before it was more like north-south. We had people from all economic areas, and it's not, the current way it is not quite the same, and we've had more issues, increased issues. I will email you what the feedback I've been getting from the community, and I will also email you my concerns, but I would love if we could look at because when I went to high school in the Middle Ages, we had people from the East Bench that
Right, like Wasatch.
yeah.
High.
I do think it's going to be complicated by the fact that this high school is now in Timbuktu in the west, right? Before it was right there so the East could come, but I will email you and just, I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but I would like that to be looked at.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Okay, anything else about our boundary and feasibility study?
Oh, it's exciting. It's going.
Let's go. All right, well, we will now take a break until 10:25, so we got about 15-minute break.
Gina, great.
All right, everybody, welcome back. It's 10:25. We're going to continue with our study session. And before we get to C number 1, our cell phone survey results, Devin had something quick she wanted to share with us.
So I just got a text and the switchgear has arrived on Wasatch's campus. And it is being unloaded as we speak. So that's awesome news. And then also they have, the other piece that was possibly going to delay was the pour and play on the kindergarten. They are scheduled on Monday. So two really good pieces of news today. So I thought we'd lighten things up just a minute. So there you go.
Fantastic. Thank you for that.
It was
great
your
news.
hope and optimism.
Oh, it was not my hope and optimism. It was the extra $4,000 we paid for an additional driver. But, you know, we can say it's my hope and optimism.
Well, we are
But
grateful for that.
So that puts us,
the
pretty good to being on time, so.
All right, thank you. So next we have our cell phone survey results, and we'll just go ahead. Do you want to speak, Wendy, or should we turn it to Caleb?
I'm gonna have Caleb just
Okay.
talk for just a second to explain what
Let's go,
what you
Caleb.
can see
Yeah,
in the
thank you.
document, and then
I know, it's nice that
kind of just allow you to ask questions and process.
Very helpful.
Let me pull this. Thanks, Daryl. Okay, so last night I shared with all of you, hopefully a kind of quick and clear summary. I don't know, do you want us to display it, or you guys all just want to pull it up and look at it? Whichever way.
I can display it if you
I
want.
think displaying it is great, just
Okay.
so that
Display
if
would be
anyone's
great for the
watching-
public who's
Okay.
watching. Yes, thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, happy to do it.
So within this document, I broke it down as many of the ways that Wendy had shared with me that you guys were wanting to look at it as I could. So you'll see the results as a whole, and then broken down by parents, students, teachers, and then other district employees. And then within the parent, student, and teacher groups, it's broken down by high school, middle school, and elementary school. So the first section in the blue, it's just all the responses together. This does not include the Spanish results. We had about 85 to 90 results, but the reports weren't working last night, so I couldn't add it. Looking at it, they're very similar to what you're seeing on these results, so it wouldn't drastically skew any of the answers, but they are not included in here. In total, we had a little over 3,500 responses to this survey. In all the responses, you'll see wherever there was an other, I built a sheet along the bottom and put the open-ended answers in there so that you could read them. A lot of them just kind of restate some of the options that were given, and they gave more details about why they felt that way. When you get to the question at the very end where it asks if you have anything else to say, there is a little bit more information that you'll see in there.
Is that in sheet 6?
Yes,
Okay.
sheet 6 would be the if you have anything else to add. Yeah, but a lot of it too, in skimming and reading these, they kind of align with what you're seeing in the results. They're kind of, certain people feel this way, certain people feel that way, they're opposite, but it kind of aligns with the numbers that you're seeing in the results. So you can look through these and see really quickly the two areas where you'll see kind of differences are once you get to the students, and especially the middle school and high school students. They have very different feelings than parents and teachers about restricting cell phone use at schools. And then also the question about should watches be treated the same as phones. You'll see some, most people supportive of that until you get to the students there as well.
Do you guys just need a minute to look at it, or do you have specific questions about it? I could ask you some questions to guide you through the data analysis if you want.
I will say, I thought reading through all the comments last night on those sheets, there were a series of, like, for me anyway, talking points or questions or concerns that enough people shared that I thought as we're discussing this and moving forward, we should have some of these conversations, so I thought that was really helpful, and I kind of tried to lump those down, but there is quite a list. And also, in that data, beyond the numbers and the summaries, but in those comments, people raised some really thoughtful points that we have to make sure we're aware of, some of which I hadn't thought through at all, but quickly became clear could be some consequences that would not benefit our students. So thank you, because I know this is a huge body of data, and thank you for summarizing it in a way where we can access and use it. And I hope we'll let the public see this. I think we should share this with the legislators. This is a large body of data that's well handled, so thanks.
Bonnie has uploaded the Excel spreadsheets onto board docs so people can access it.
Great.
So. Was there anything that surprised you in what you're seeing?
One of the questions not necessarily from this, but from the emails was, are we legally allowed to take the students' phones away from them?
Yeah.
Like confiscate them? That was one of the questions, and I'm like, I don't know. Are we allowed to?
A lot of people have asked that.
Yeah.
Who can touch the phone? How long can they keep it? Et cetera.
Yeah.
I don't know the law.
Well, I think you would treat a phone like you would treat other things that created distraction in a school environment. So for example, you know, if a kid has something on them that they're fidgeting with and it's really preventing them from interacting with the lesson, the teacher does have a right to take that item, even if it does belong to the student. You can keep it and say, no, the parent has to come and pick it up. Like we have that set up in other settings.
Yeah.
What you're not allowed to do is you can't search the phone without probable cause. It's like searching a backpack, right? You can't just say, everybody's got to open up their backpack and I get to see what's in it. You can't do that. So there has to be some sort of belief that something illegal has happened or something serious is threatening somebody's safety before you can start searching through a phone. And really, you can't make a kid turn over a code on a phone to you without the parent permission, because there's so much private information on that. You would have to be very careful about that. But as soon as you confiscate that phone, the district is liable for it. So if it gets broken, if it gets stolen, we would be responsible for replacing it in its entirety as a result, which is why you see some of the school districts and schools give the kid the pouch and they put their phone in it and lock it up and they just keep it for the rest of the day and then go down to the office and have the office unlock it. And as I was reading through the comments, I felt like there was a little bit more support from parents for that because the students still had it. There was still some concern about emergency situations
And
then
also,
what was gonna
there
happen.
was some concern, it may have been the same parent who posted that under any kind of open response section, but around those, like do we know, do the pouches somehow in blocking signal do some kind of harm to a device?
I think that's
or-
like different technology. I think
Okay.
pouches is one, and then you could have like some type of signal
Oh, I
blocker.
see, okay,
Yeah.
because I was
So I
like,
don't think
wait,
pouches
what?
would
Okay.
interfere with the
No,
service.
thank you.
Is
Yeah.
very much that.
It's just you can't access
You
the
just
phone
can't
itself.
open
physically
it, okay.
Well,
get your phone.
there are, just for clarification, there are signal blocking pouches, but I
Yes.
don't know that that's what we would want to do.
Okay. Okay. Because that was, I mean, I think as we talk about what we want to do, one thing obviously that we should discuss is kind of our steps of consequences, for lack of other words, to the phone becoming a distraction in a class, and, you know, make sure that what those are, we can pay for, if it's paid for in time or in resources, you know, human resources, but also a pouch or
Right.
something like that. Like, I think we do want to talk about how we want to handle that. If we have a policy where a student can't have it out in class, and they do have it out in class, I know what our policy currently says, but maybe we'd want to think about how much would it cost to have a
So many
pouch to hand
pouches.
to a student in a class, et cetera.
I think you're gonna wanna approach this in probably 3 different ways. I think you're gonna wanna decide, what do you want the policy to be, or what is your recommendation at the elementary level
cell phones, watches. Middle school, cell phones, watches. High school, cell phones, watches. Then start talking about, okay, so for the student that violates this, then what are the consequences at each level, right? And you can parse that out. And then how are you gonna deal with all of the exceptions? What do we do in an emergency situation? What do we do with students who are using this for, they have a 504 plan, they're using it for medical things, like that needs to be accounted for in the policy. Are you gonna have any time at all when it's allowed, at any level? What does that look like? And so I just think you need to separate the elementary, the middle, and the high school, and you'll move through it much more quickly. Because I think there's less stress about elementary. There seems to be a little bit more stress about middle school and high school. And then when you started looking at the data on the watches, Kayla pointed this out to me at first when we were getting the results back at first. It was, yes, same restrictions for watches as for phones, but now you see it's almost split 50-50. But when you look at the legislation puts watches in the same category as a phone. And so we would need to write that into the policy if we're saying we're not going to categorize a watch as long as it's only used for these things in the same way. So this is going to be quite a process. And I also just want to make a recommendation, and I thought this was so good from our students and Student Advisory Council, because they did talk about, I don't get out my phone in an AP class. I don't get out my phone in this class because if I'm on my phone, I miss really important things. And I think a piece of this for parents will be, we need to make a commitment as a district that our classes are engaging and rigorous, and the expectation is that teachers teach bell to bell. And that has to be part of the process. So that's a question to answer. And then I think one other question to address is, and I think this was brought up also in the Student Advisory Council, Daryl brought this up, do you have resentment in schools where teachers uphold the policy and from, those that uphold the policy towards those that don't? And are you as a board going to be willing to take a teacher that is a highly popular teacher, maybe a highly engaging teacher who doesn't follow that policy, and are we gonna raise it to the level of disciplinary action like we would other things? So those are just things that we need to keep in mind as we write the policy and recognize that most people are gonna comply with it. So policies are written for the people that often don't comply with it, so.
Yeah, and when you were talking about the engagement in classroom, there are a couple other things in here where people are concerned about not having the phone that I think we can address. Like,
Yes.
they're like, oh, I need to access a certain app or check my grades.
Yep.
And it's like, okay, well, let's just go over how there's other ways that
Yes.
you can do that.
Exactly.
Or you can check your grade outside of class, right? Like, just certain things that maybe we just need to make sure we've got some good systems, including checking your kid out of school. A lot of our parents are relying on, I need to text my kid because I can't get hold of the office to
Yeah.
check them
That's
out.
right.
So are our systems at our schools able to handle the volume of those kinds of things
Great
when
questions.
the parent can't access their kid during the middle of class? Yeah.
And I like a balanced approach and some flexibility for teachers, though. If a teacher, if a teacher is helping a student apply for scholarships and things and they can't use their school email for those, right, because the firewall blocks them, which has happened with my kids multiple times, they have to use their personal email. And then they want a 2-factor authentication, and so then they text them that. And so I do feel like there needs to be, whatever we do, some flexibility of the need and intent of use, so that if, the person running if the teacher or the administrator in that environment feels that there is a legitimate use and need, that we've written a policy in a way where they can say, this is an instance where you can take out your phone because it's gonna help us to fill out this application or apply for
Very
this scholarship.
specific tool in that.
Yeah, I was talking to a Provo High teacher the other day, and he was saying the kids will say, like, can I please use my phone to take a picture of the assignment to upload to Canvas because the quality is better than the Chromebook? and they'll ask, and he'll say yes, and then they put it away right after,
Yeah.
right? So, but I do think we also have to be careful how we write that, because we don't want a teacher just being like, sure, I'm using the exception to just let you have your phone all the time, or to not enforce the policy with the intent that it was written.
I also worry about our kids who don't have cell phones, and then we're allowing kids with cell phones to do some things that our kids without cell phones can't do. So I think we just need to be very mindful and I don't think we need to punish kids with cell phones, right? But we need to be very, very careful if we're doing things in classrooms that it's better to have a cell phone and we have kids who do
Yeah.
not. That's an
No, that's
equity
right.
issue. So I think
Yeah.
that's just gonna be something
Yeah.
that we need to look at. I'm not saying we shouldn't do either of the things you guys talked about, but we have to really we're gonna really have to think about this and figure it out, because there are kids who don't have phones. And how are we gonna make sure that they're not being disadvantaged?
So do we want to go through each of those? Like, what do we kind of want to see at each level?
Yeah,
And how you outlined it
Can
over there?
I ask, I did not have time last night to look at this, so I'm just barely looking at it now. Is there anything, Wendy, or anybody who's looked at it, that just needs to be pulled out before that conversation? Because I didn't have a chance, or maybe everybody did, and I can just catch up. Like, is there like an overview?
Do you wanna take just 5 minutes and look at it and just have an opportunity to start looking through it a little bit?
So I did kind of look at it, it's gonna take me longer than 5 minutes.
Yeah,
So are there just takeaways that
Caleb-
people
Caleb,
saw?
you have
Yeah,
a few summaries
I
you
give
could
you
give
a
us?
couple things that I noticed. One, the student responses skew some of the answers quite a bit, where you'll see parents and teachers and employees are fairly similar, especially when you get to the middle school and high school questions. The elementary school questions, when we ask them what they feel about the current policy, their support all the way through for that, from all levels. When you get to the middle schools, it's still pretty supportive, like Wendy was pointing out, but the students start having a little bit more concern there. Then the high school, all across the board, there's more concern with, or more opinions on whether the current policy's too lenient, too strict, or just right. The watch question, when you look at the overall results, it's fairly close. I think it was 52% to 48%. Students skewed that one quite a bit. On the other levels, there's a bigger gap there. When you're talking about confiscation, there's not one that's higher than all the rest, but the two that have the most support are students placing it in a designated area, or a teacher taking it, the admin taking it, or I guess the other option was nobody should ever take it. There's not a whole lot of support for that, except for the students in high school. They don't want anybody taking it. But for the most part, those first two, the students put it somewhere, or teacher takes it. And then as far as the question about what they feel would be the best to restrict access, the teacher or the student put it in their pocket or in their backpack or purse generally has the most support. But it's really when you get to the middle school and high school level, looking at the students have a very different opinion. And then it surprised me a little bit that there was, the parents had, as many parents had concerns about restricting cell phones as they did.
So what was that, 48% of parents had?
For
which grade?
Overall, do we have an overall?
overall, for which
Do
question?
parents having concerns about?
Restricting the bell, is that what you're asking?
At the high
That's
school
question
level?
by question.
So a complete restriction at the high school level, yeah, overall it was 35% yes, 65 no. When you get to the high school parents, yeah, that's what Daryl's saying, is 39% to 61% no to a full restriction at the high school level.
46 to 54.
So high school parents, okay, I wish I'd had more of this, okay.
You can point out at Daryl.
Yeah, 39.
The high
Yeah,
school,
I thought
and
it was surprising that 61% of the parent responses of our high school students said no to a bell-to-bell
I think-
policy.
I think because they want to get hold of their kid, I mean, that's.
I think it
what
really
we've
comes
heard.
down to, I mean, being in a PTA meeting where parents, that was their biggest issue. That they cannot get a hold of their kid when they've tried calling the front office. And that's
Well-
their concern.
And also, from parents I've heard from just personally, I think they feel like a balanced approach would say, in a classroom environment, you know, a phone should not be a distraction, but their issue with this question may be the bell-to-bell part of it, where they can't check a phone during a passing period or at lunch.
And I didn't break it down here, I can
Yeah.
go back and look at it. I would be curious how much of that, the high school parents saying that also commented about emergency situations. If there's any tie there, but I can go look at that, I wasn't able to break it down that far for today.
For me personally, and so maybe this is what other parents might be thinking as well, like I've been wondering, you take, you know, with anything in life, you start at one level and then you slowly like learn a little bit, and you do a little bit more, right? And so we have like a complete restriction when they're younger, but at some point you got to give a little bit of opportunity for them to have access to things and to learn how to have access to things. And so I wonder if some of it might be like, well, they're older now, they should be able to have access to it during part of their day to be able to communicate or to learn how to have a phone as part of your day, right? But just not during class. So I don't know if that's part of the thinking.
Some of the math that actually didn't make sense to me a little bit was if you go and look under I'm just looking at high school parents right now, responses, and you scroll down to 30, where it says, for high schools, the current draft cell phone policy states that devices must remain silent out of sight during class periods, but may be used before, this is what we're talking about, could be used before and after, during lunch, et cetera. And then 66% thought that was just right. 22% thought it was too lenient. So that's like 88% you would think who then would say bell to bell is the right choice, but that isn't the number of parents who did say bell to bell. Do you know what I'm saying? So I thought that was just an interesting kind of just thing to say, that I think everyone's grappling with this. I don't think a lot of us as even parents are clear exactly what we think should happen
Also,
with
as you
this.
start
you
a
know?
survey and you're asked
Yeah.
something, and then as you kind of go through it and you're
Yeah, that
like,
might be it.
okay, I'm thinking through
Yeah.
it more, you know, maybe your opinion changes a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. Go
I
ahead, Meg.
think looking at the responses where it is the emergency situation, getting hold of my kid during those times, I do think there is
Yeah.
evidence, though, that cell phones create a bigger problem in emergency situations. When, as a district, trying to communicate what is actually going on.
So clarifying, when the emergency is
Okay.
at the school, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, so I guess, yes, and I guess that would be helpful. Emergency, like a family emergency, or like when there is something happening at the school and wanting to communicate with your child, or vice versa, and say, what's happening, where I think it can be more helpful when that communication is coming from the district, and we're making sure we're following what needs to be followed in any of those given emergency situations. I think, I guess I, and myself included, I think sometimes I can see where my kid is, I have this phone communication, it's a false sense of security, and I think we're sometimes saying, oh, I need this security, where I am curious if that is as safe as we think it is. I
Yeah.
don't know if that makes sense, and
I think we saw that when Provo High had the scare.
yeah.
There was I received lots of panic phone calls because kids heard things, and then other people put it on social media, and there's some panic. So I think it does
Yeah, and
sometimes.
it could actually hinder what needs to happen.
Yeah,
in those
especially if they're
situations,
saying, because some kids, there was nothing happening, but they were like, the person with the gun is here, but there was no gun. But the person is here, and they weren't there. So I agree with you, I guess, is
That's
my
what
point.
And to speak to that, though, it is a genuine fear and concern that a lot of parents have and students
Yeah.
have, right, about being able to communicate if something is going on. So as we're talking and thinking about this, I think it would be important then that we just communicate really clearly with all of stakeholders, like how we are handling emergency
Yes, what's our
communications. What is our
process?
expectation?
Yeah.
What can you expect, and
Yes.
from whom will you receive this information that's valid and really representative of what's going, like, I just think that we need to over-communicate that as well, but it is
Yeah.
a real concern that I felt like rang through a lot of people's comments was about safety.
And I'm not negating that it's
Yeah.
not a legitimate
Right.
concern. I just, in any of these things, being mindful, okay, let's
Yeah.
talk about this and look at this. You know, how would it really be helpful that kids with cell phones can communicate things out, you know,
If it's a legitimate safety issue, like at the time, let's say there was, heaven forbid, a school shooter or something happening, the kids would have their phone on them. And I would think at that point, would they be allowed to take their phones out and communicate with their
Right.
parents?
I think the point is, though, law enforcement will tell you that it jams their systems and it actually makes it
Yeah.
harder for them to respond. But I think we also have to look
You're
at,
never
in that
gonna
moment,
shut
as a
that down.
parent, I don't care what's happening
Yeah.
with the rest of the school. I care about what's happening with my child.
And that's- yeah.
And so, me being able to communicate and know that they're in a safe place or that they can't hear anything or whatever, that's gonna ease my stress for a half a minute, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, based on the survey data, like, there's not a lot of desire to have it in one of those secured pouches, right? So if it is just in their backpack, or
Right.
even in something across the room that they could easily access, you know, they would be able to if they needed to.
I haven't had a chance to look at all the comments or anything like that, but was there any feedback that parents were upset that they weren't out, so that if they feel like a teacher was doing something wrong, that they could record them?
Yeah,
We got some feedback
we let-
and emails about that.
we've had emails
Yeah.
and feedback. Did it show up really in here? I feel like there was
I-
one
We did
comment.
once.
I don't
One
remember
comment
seeing
I
anything
remember,
like that. I haven't read every single one word for word,
Yeah.
but I don't remember seeing
I thought
that
there was
coming through.
one. I mean, a couple of things, the comments did highlight a couple of things we can also be talking about, which one was when teachers, advisors, coaches, play directors, et cetera, are changing notifications and schedules throughout a day and texting that information out to students. That can be tricky. Like, I can remember having one of my kids who didn't have a phone at the time, was in a school play, and they would miss rehearsal or show up at the wrong rehearsal because they weren't on their phone, right? And so parents are saying, okay, if you're gonna do this, then maybe you need to make sure those notifications are at least 24 hours in advance and communicated in an alternative way than, you know what I mean? So
Email,
those are just some
Chromebook.
things to be
I
thoughtful of as
I
we
do
go through
think
this.
that some of those systems will naturally change,
Yeah, I
right?
think too.
Knowing that the kids won't access their phones as much, or, I mean, they will have their Chromebooks with them. So send an email or a Canvas notification, right?
Mm.
Which is access what Gina was saying earlier. For those who don't have the phones, that's better anyway, because then it's easier for everybody. So, I mean, some of, whatever we end up deciding, it will maybe have to change a few current systems, but I think we can adapt, right?
And I think it's gonna, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, going along with that, though, if they are getting an update on a group meet or something like that, they could get that information between passing times,
If
if that's how it chooses to go.
Right. I also
Gina-
thought we,
Gina
oh,
had
go,
something.
yeah.
So I was just gonna say that I think it's gonna be a culture shift for schools, and it's gonna be a culture shift for families. And we're all gonna have to work together, and that's why I'm happy that we're already thinking ahead about communication and things like that. It'll be a culture shift.
Lisa?
I appreciated the students weighing in about having family responsibilities. I know Superintendent Dow's brought this up before, but students checking even on the health of their parents or people, you know, if they're in a role in a family where they're working and supporting or providing transportation for siblings and things like that, like, we need to be mindful of, not that we should distract the learning environments, but just of students who have that kind of responsibility or applying for jobs, et cetera, that there is a way, I feel like, that this doesn't get in the way of other things they're doing that are significant responsibilities.
And I think if they had access between periods, like, I don't think it's, like, when I've applied for jobs, it wouldn't be healthy for me to be looking at my phone every 5 minutes
Right.
to see if I've gotten a reply. So I think if we were to go in that direction, I think that would take care of it. One question that I have is, and from one of my constituents, and he sent an email that I think I forwarded to you guys, but And I've heard stories, I think they're not that often, but when they happen, they're a big deal. And that is, if you have a child who has significant disabilities or they need, so there's already exceptions for that, but I've heard multiple stories. And again, I don't think it's all that often, but it happens and it's a concern. What happens when you have a substitute or you have a teacher in the classroom who's not normally there? We need to figure out a way that something maybe that's permanent, that they could point someone to. I don't even know what I'm talking. I thought maybe something on the wall, but then that singles a kid out. So I don't know what, but how are we going to ensure that these students have access to what they need, even when their teacher who knows everything about them is not in the room? So I think that's just something I don't think we need to hash that out right now, but it's something I would like us to be considering as we are moving forward with policy.
So today, we're going to give some general direction on the major points, right, Wendy? And then policy committee will work on this, and then we'll have a draft for
the next
our
board meeting.
October 8th meeting.
That's the goal.
Okay, so should we go ahead and start on
I think so.
elementary cell phones? Are we good with the way we have it, with a bell-to-bell?
With cell phones,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good with it.
Cell phones.
The way we have it, remind me, I should know this, I'm on policy committee. Put away and in the backpack and silenced?
That's what your parents are telling you they prefer, they don't want it. Or in a central location in the classroom, but not locked up or not kept in the office.
I think backpack,
I think it
And
needs,
off, or airplane mode.
yes.
Do we have, I'm just thinking, do we have any elementary schools that have backpacks that are hanging up outside the classroom?
I think, that's a good question.
We
They
do
don't
not?
anymore.
So
That was our
everything would
old
be in a
ones.
cubby inside the classroom? Correct. Okay, because that would have been my only concern with that one, is that the backpack would have been outside the door.
This says, the current draft says that including smartwatches at the elementary are not to be seen. Personally, I think if we say that that smartwatch is set to school mode or whatever, they can have it on their wrist.
Because there were concerns
There are concerns about putting that in a backpack and, I don't know, I guess I think, again, then if it's not a distraction to learning and personally, I think that that's okay. I mean, it does say on here, smartwatch is set to silent, but for me, that's one shift that I would make from the policy.
So we pull
Gina?
out.
Sorry. So I've been in a meeting with a principal where a kid's smartwatch was going off constantly. And even when it was on silent, it was,
Light up.
Buzzing.
right.
it
And so it
was.
needs to be more than, in my opinion, it needs to be more than silent. It needs to be on do not disturb. And at the elementary level, we should be able, I would hope, to handle any emergencies to come through the office. But I do think it needs to be on, like my daughter has one that she never wears, but when she does take it to school, it's do not disturb between school hours. And then if there's a problem with, like, the principal couldn't even have a conversation with this kid because it was constantly, and it was family members, right? And so I think maybe just, I don't remember what I was gonna say. Oh, letting him have it on the arm, but then we're gonna have to figure out it as a policy, how are we going, if there are infractions, and really at the elementary level, that goes back to the parents, in my opinion, because I'm the one who has access to that on my daughter's watch. So I think we're gonna have to talk a little differently for this than we did about middle school and high school, but how are we going to then, because it's not disciplining the kid, it's gonna be how do we get the parents to be on board with it? So I think that's gonna have to be baked into the policy or procedure.
Or
Well-
if the parent doesn't even know how to use the technology, maybe they teach them?
I need that a
Well-
lot, so I actually think that's a really
Well, and I
benevolent
do think
approach.
they can keep a watch on if it's do not disturb, then we're using it as a watch, right? But if
Right.
any time it's not used as a watch, then it needs to go in the backpack just like a cell phone, right? So maybe that becomes the first consequence, like if there's an issue with your watch, it's gotta go in the backpack.
So my daughter's had her lunchbox stolen twice this year. We've got our fingers crossed that the third one doesn't get stolen. It is in a wagon, so it is more open, but I do worry about elementary kids and stolen. I think my daughter is the only one in the school who's had her
need
lunchbox
to
stolen
get
this year.
You need to get a more average lunchbox.
It's a $5 Target lunchbox. But anyway, my point in bringing that up is if she's had her lunchbox stolen, are we gonna get into situations where kids are taking cell phones out of other kids or out of other kids' backpacks in elementary? And I think in middle school and high school, they have them with them, right? I don't know about elementary school. So just something to throw out there. Just because it's been my experience this year.
They already have a policy that the phones can't be out, so we haven't, I mean, Jared, I don't know that we've had a lot of reports of this being an issue. I think the bigger issue with the watch that the feedback that I've received is that the parent is concerned that the student will forget to put it on when they're going home. And that's how they're tracking, because their kid walks home from school and then they can track to see that their kid made it home and that they're doing okay and that kind of thing. And so that was more their concern. They absolutely didn't want it to be a distraction during the school day, and they told their kid to put it on Do Not Disturb. But they were worried if it was taken off, the student wouldn't put it back on.
Parents need to be the ones to put on do not disturb, to be honest.
We did receive one principal reach out to us with concern about not just bell to bell, but like on school property with having issues before and after school of kids showing inappropriate things on their phones to other kids and things. So I wonder if we do want to change the language for elementary about the difference between bell to bell, and I don't know how we address that, or do we need to address that?
Do you address that instance like case by case when that's happening?
I mean,
Yeah,
I would say that would be happening on all levels.
Yeah, Jared,
Yeah.
what were you gonna say?
Jared, do you have some thoughts on that?
I think we could wordsmith that when the time comes, if that's where we land, but, you know, with each school having a different schedule, that term bell to bell is problematic, but I think we can come up with the right language.
Okay, so maybe just something for, as policy committee starts to work on it, to think about. I don't know. And then we're gonna have a draft, and then we're gonna get more input, so we can still keep tweaking during October. Gina?
I think we can put something, as we wordsmith, we can put something in there that if that occurs, then like, if your student has that occurred, then we need to have a conversation about them not bringing a cell phone to school. Because if that's the problem, I don't think that's a bridge too far.
We already have that in
Okay,
policy. So there's already an electronic devices policy that states that if a student is using it for inappropriate material or pornography or things like that, then the school can take action against that. So that's not gonna be any
Okay,
different in this
perfect.
particular situation.
All right, are we ready to move on to middle school? Or do any other thoughts on elementary?
What about the concerns in, like with watches as well, about kids taking video in class or videoing their teacher? I mean, can we address that? I think that was another concern
That's what I was bringing up.
did you, okay.
Well, no, but we didn't really
Yeah.
dig.
Do watches do that? I don't even.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
okay,
Yeah,
wow.
it's happened.
I
at
have a
my
very basic watch.
kids' school. And I guess, in my mind, I don't want to foster an environment where that is okay, in the sense that I think it creates a hostile environment in our classrooms for our teachers if that's happening. Or.
In my mind, if a parent has a significant concern about what's happening in a classroom, the default should not be, I'm gonna tell my kid to video what's happening in the
Yes.
classroom. The default should be, I'm gonna schedule a meeting with the principal and the teacher to address it. And then if I feel like something isn't
Yes.
happening, then I might have my kid take matters into their own hands. But that would be then after I have documented that I have tried to resolve this through appropriate ways. But if a student is just doing that unilaterally, that's not appropriate. That isn't the kind of environment we want to create.
And personally, I think the language of the policy kind of does cover that without it needing to
Yeah.
be called out specifically, because, I don't know, there's a lot of fear and concern behind some of those things, and so I just feel like by making this about, the use of cell phones and creating and fostering an engaging learning environment, which I really appreciated you addressing in terms of our, teaching and learning that's going on. I do think it's covered, do you know what I'm saying? But I don't know.
Well, they wouldn't be able to video it if it's in Do Not Disturb, because if it's in a Do Not Disturb mode, then it shouldn't be utilized like how a cell phone's being used. And so if we put that language in it, it covers that piece of it.
All right, middle school. Currently, it's bell to bell for cell phones. Are we still good with that?
Well, I think both our schools have done that on their own, so I don't,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't
And
feel
they're
like
very
we should
happy
go
with
in and
it.
change
Yes,
that
they
for
are.
them.
Their
Like,
principals and
yeah, I think
teachers
they're
are
kind
pretty
of
happy.
Great.
leading the way.
Okay, so how do we address the watches then with our middle school?
Same
I
way.
think
Same as
same
we just
way.
talked about?
Do
Okay.
not disturb.
But they can have it on, but yeah, on their wrist.
To function as a watch, not as a communication tool. Sorry, was
Are we
Lisa
okay if
or
a watch
Terry
is
who's gonna-
functioning as a fitness device?
Fitness,
Yes.
Okay.
watch and fitness.
And of course, medical, whatever the medical
Yeah.
needs
Yeah.
are.
Lisa, were you gonna say something?
Sorry. Well, maybe you're gonna ask about it later. I was just wondering then about like some clarification around who can or cannot, like who takes the phone, where is it stored?
Let's get through the
So,
three
yeah,
levels and
that's-
then let's talk
I
about
think
that.
that's why I was
Great
like, I should
question.
talk
That's a
about
great
that later.
question.
Yeah. Okay, so are we ready to move to high school?
I have one question,
Gina.
and I'm reading the policy. I'm trying to see if it's already addressed. If it is, you can kick me. Mike can kick me.
That's a good kick, that's pretty far.
I'm not thinking about Meg kicking me, and I don't know what my question was. We can move on. Oh, can they use, if they need to contact their parents, can they take it, middle schoolers, or I guess elementary schoolers, can they take it to the office and then contact their parents with their phones? Does that make sense?
I think we have that in policy.
perfect.
Yeah, we have that
Thank you.
written down. And they would just ask the teacher, and I
It
just
is
want
in
kids to be honest about what they're doing. So I think you promote that with a student to say, you know, if you need to, you know, you forgot your assignment and you need to go call your mom, let's have you walk up to the teacher and say, can I walk down to the office? And the teacher might say, just step in the hall and call your mom right here. That's totally fine. And then when they bring it, then it comes to the office. And, you know, like, I think teachers can be, I'm hoping that we can be reasonable in how we respond to that.
Because we also have a lot of middle school students with anxiety and worry, and so that's a tricky thing too, where, I mean, there should be a safe space though, if a student needs to go and just kind of reach out or check in,
Yeah.
like maybe with the school counselor or social worker or someone, so that a teacher can say, you know what, why don't you take a break and, you know what I mean?
The
Here's
wellness-
the place
the
where you
wellness
go
room.
Yeah.
to be able to do that, that's not distracting the learning environment.
As long as they're not taking their phone and getting on social media in the wellness room, right? Because that's what's gonna happen if we don't have an adult there with them. That's what I would do if there was something happening. I'd be like, I'm gonna go to the
Well,
wellness
I'm
room.
assuming they would only go where there was an adult.
And I think,
Yeah.
and I think you would just write it into a 504. So if they have a
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
significant issue, then it would be, this is how, it's not like you can do it whenever you want, but you would establish like time periods or when the student needs a break with no more than X number of times per day, or, and they're gonna go to this location and check in with this person. That's usually how they're written, so that they would be that specific.
I would like to see, I mean, I think all these points are very good and that they can use their phones for that, but that generally, like, if they need to go to the bathroom during
They leave
class,
their
the
phone.
cell phone needs to be like,
It's kind of your hall pass.
trade the hall pass, leave your cell phones in a designated spot while you're at the bathroom. Gina?
I would love to see, and maybe it doesn't need to be in policy, but maybe in our communications, because I know that there's a lot of kids with anxiety. I don't want to talk about my kids, she'll get mad at me. But there's a lot of kids with anxiety, right? And so they've been using the cell phones in class to listen to music or whatever, and while that, speaking as a mental health therapist who specializes with youth, I get it, I understand it. I do think that there are other things that they could do, so I would love for our students and parents to, before they default automatically to the phone, I would love for them to go talk to our school counselors, who may hate me as well for saying this, but I'd love to have them talk to our school social workers, school counselors. Are there other things that they can be doing in the classroom? And this is a life skill, right? Again, speaking as a therapist, this is a life skill. I can't whip out my phone and do, or I can, but it's not gonna be a good thing to have. So I don't know how, I don't know that that's, I don't think we can write that into policy, but I think in our communications, maybe we can encourage that. And then warn our people at the schools that they may have, the first few weeks, they may have a lot of kids coming in.
All right, high school. What do we want?
here we go.
What do we want for our cell phones? Gina's gonna throw.
I
out-
will tell you what as I've been, my mind has changed a lot on this. Where I'm landing right now is I would like the phones to be not on their person, but in a backpack. When they're, we're gonna talk about confiscation later. I think there should be pouches for confiscation, which we can talk about later. Smartwatches, I think, need to be the same as the other two levels. If it's set to do not disturb, then they can have it on their person.
And if their cell phone, like, I think we should say cell phone should be off or on airplane mode,
Yes.
because then also their cell phone can't talk
Yes.
to their watch that way, right?
Yes.
And we can't hear the buzzing in the backpack.
Right, and the reason I say put it in the backpack is because there's just, when my phone's going off next to me and I'm doing something else, it's distracting to me, and I think the whole reason we're doing this, in my opinion, I think at least what I've landed on is, I want a good learning environment. That's my responsibility here, right? The rest of it, not necessarily my direct responsibility, but I struggle to see how they will have a good learning environment if all of their notifications are coming on their phones. So I'd like it to be in the
Or if
backpack.
it's buzzing in their pocket.
Correct. So that's why I want it in the backpack. And I think that will, and then they can use it during passing periods. I think there are other concerns that come up when they have them during passing periods and stuff like that, but I also struggle with, is that my responsibility or the school's responsibility to be, I mean, the school will have to monitor some things, but as a school board, is that our responsibility to make sure that the kids are using their phones the way that they should be using? So anyway.
Okay. Gina threw it out there. How does everybody else feel about that?
I agree with Gina on that one. I think we need to make sure that if we're gonna have a policy that it's being enforced in all the classes, like, that's where it gets tricky. Who's going to make sure that the teacher is being aware, that it's happening in all the classes, that it is, rigor is happening in every single class. But I have no problem with the students having it during passing time and lunchtime. But
I found it interesting that, a lot of times I will hear from parents that are concerned about us taking on responsibilities outside of what they think are our core public ed responsibilities. So they'll say, why are you wading in on social and emotional learning or some of these other topics? But some of those parents have been actually some of the same parents who've then reached out to me and said, why aren't you teaching kids to use their cell phones? And so I recognize that actually all of those are some valid questions, right? Like, these are jobs that have to happen. Whose jobs are they, and where do they take place? And so I just want to acknowledge that those are complicated questions. This is a complicated issue. Our priority, though, as a board, is around our academic learning environment and the support of our teachers, as well as the wellness and safety of our students. And when we surveyed people, wellness and safety was off the charts, and parents' concern for their kids, right? And so all of that comes to play related to cell phones, and this is hard, but I do think a balanced approach that says, there are some advantages to not having those phones during passing periods, and there are students who are going to use phones in ways we wish they weren't at school around, cyberbullying or some of those things. But again, like, their parents are teaching this at home. We're trying at schools to also be supporting that learning, but we also have to support the content and curriculum in our classes and that learning first. So anyway, I know that really didn't say anything, but I'm just thinking through all of the different levers and my own kind of ideas moving around on this topic to say, I know it's complicated, but I do like the idea of our high school students having the ability to use their phones as tools when it's appropriate. And I think it is complicated to even say never in a classroom. I would like to get, maybe it's too messy, but I'd like to give teachers the ability to say, here's where this is an appropriate use, this is an appropriate ask. If the purpose of the phone is to support the learning environment, I know that then could get to like teachers pitting against teachers, so I think that's tricky, but I don't know.
Not everybody has a phone, so
Yes, I know.
And I think, though, too, phones are a tool, and they can be a resource for learning. But I do think we can be okay with saying there's other tools in our classrooms. Kids can go home with phones after school when they're doing their homework and use those tools as they need. I don't know. I just think in their classrooms, maybe we can just move to where they don't need their phones in the classroom.
I guess if we're saying that they can't, I don't know if you're saying, are you saying that they can have it during passing time or not?
Yeah, I'm curious, though, if any real impact in a community would be like to really see if you had no phones, and I would wonder in a month or 2 months if kids are like, oh yeah, it's actually really nice not to worry about my phone for a day. I mean, we do have a parent who talked to me. She teaches at a private school in American Fork. And she was like, called me like, I just have to tell you, our school does the patches, went phone free, and it's been the best thing for our whole school. Granted, it's a different population, it's much smaller. Those are things that I don't think it's gonna be, looking at the data, I don't think we can do that. But I am just curious of really seeing an impact. I'm curious if just doing it in our classrooms, if we will see an impact or not, but I think it's where we can start, and it's what we maybe have responsibility over and that we can justify with what families want, parents want, our schools want, but yeah, that's just, I guess going back to, I do think, no, I don't think, I'm not arguing that cell phones aren't great tools, can't enhance
Right.
learning.
Yeah.
I just think, well, our teachers can't do it all. I mean, if we start saying, well, appropriate times, it just then,
Gets muddy.
then we don't really need a policy. I think we do just leave it up to our teachers and our schools to kind of figure out what works best for them. And maybe that's, at the end of the day, what we want to do. But it did seem like teachers wanted something in the survey.
I think you're gonna find that even Paula was saying this at Student Advisory Council. She said the teachers really appreciated the cell phone. Tell me if I'm wrong, Daryl, in how I interpreted that, but I feel like she felt like that the teachers were supportive of that. They felt like it wasn't leaving it to them to be good cop or bad cop about it. And so, and while there are definitely gonna be some teachers that are gonna enforce it more, readily than, with greater consistency than others, that's no different than any other policy that's happening, whether it's attendance or dress code or whatever it is. So, I mean, we already have those disparities in place.
Talking about it now and get everybody ready, right? And then there's ways that we can roll it out with our faculty. Like, we're all in this team together, and this is why we're doing this, and all the benefits for you to do it fully with all of us. Like, we're all in it together. So Terry, did you have any feedback while we're talking about high school level?
No, everybody says this, what I wanted to say.
Okay. And I was thinking the same thing. I think for high school, the best thing to be doing right now is to let them have it during passing periods. And I think that will alleviate a lot of the other kinds of concerns we're having about being without your phone all day, right?
Communicating.
Yeah. Okay. Technically, our time is up with this, but I think we can keep going and
what
talk
about-
about the consequences a little bit.
Confiscation, give me
Yeah.
a little.
Well, we did the update on the boundary feasibility study already. Does that give us 10 additional minutes?
No, well, we already ate those 10 additional minutes,
Oh,
but it's okay, it's okay. I think it's one of our most important things right now, so we're gonna keep going with it. So, I've been, debating myself about how we do the consequence, but I did have a good conversation with someone this week that kind of got me thinking. Even I hadn't even considered the idea that Gina mentioned about we'd have enough pouches, there'd be a few in every classroom, and so if a teacher was like, oh, you got your phone out, put it in this pouch, it stays with them throughout the day, and then they have to go to the office to get it unlocked, and then that's how you start counting how many infractions and things. I think that's the way I'm leaning. What do you guys think?
Well, and I wonder, that happens a few times, and I do think students are like, I do not want my phone in that pouch. I'm just not, it's not worth it. It's not worth pulling my phone out in a classroom, because when that happens, right, it's just like, oh yeah, that's just my.
The only thing I would be concerned about is if a student has to go get their phone unlocked right after school, would they still be able to make the bus on time?
I don't know how do we know
I
how
don't
Provo
know.
High handles it now?
I'm just throwing out, I just don't want it to be a
Do they get to go
problem.
like 5 minutes early and get their phone, or?
It's part of the consequence.
It's
Part of the
yeah,
consequence. You might even miss your bus
Okay.
because you're on your phone. Like, you
So
better
stay
really
off
think,
your
you
phone.
better think really
Yeah.
hard about this.
I hate to add a layer to teachers, but I just wonder about notifying parents, right? Like, as a parent, I would want to know, like, because that is a consequence for sure, but I also think we want to involve parents in this conversation. If their student is having trouble using their phone as a distraction in class, from the comments I've read, parents want to know that so that they can parent through that with their child. So, but I hate to say to a teacher, not only do you have to have this thing you do where you put the child's phone into this thing, but now could you notify that
Yeah,
parent?
I'm
I
wondering,
don't
Daryl,
know.
if you could, because both our middle schools already have enforcement, and then Provo High's moved to this, so do you know how they're handling that right now?
Yeah, I can speak to one school. So they keep a spreadsheet of these students that have their phones confiscated, and the first time, I think they do notify parents, but they don't require them to come in and
Yeah.
Is
get
it
the
the
phone.
office that does a notification, or the teacher?
On that one, yes, on the first time. Then the second time, an administrator contacts the parent when they have to come in and get it. And then on the third time, they come in and meet with the student and parent, and, you know, that just kind of progresses that way. But the first time, it's just usually a phone call, and they give the student their phone back.
Okay.
At the end of the day?
At the end of the day, yes.
I think what Lisa's asking is if the teacher tells the student to lock up their phone and then the parent doesn't know and they're trying to text their kid and they can't get a hold of them, then the issue is they don't know that the phone is locked up. She's wondering, should the teacher be required to notify the parent? I'm gonna give you a hard no on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's a no too. I actually wasn't meaning in the day.
Okay.
I was speaking to what you
Okay,
said is
all right, so-
happening, which
okay,
is just like,
perfect, okay.
and I think
That's
that's, like, they probably get a warning first, right? Like, put that phone away, and then
I would
they
hope
get
so.
it.
That's what
Yeah.
it says.
Or put it, let's say you put it in a pouch, and then like you're saying, someone from the office will notify the parent.
Yeah.
That's all I was
Yeah,
asking,
yeah,
is that the parent
absolutely.
does kind of have an awareness, like, this is becoming
An
a
issue.
problem for my child, I wanna
Right.
talk to them about it.
Oh, go ahead, Gina.
If you're still on, mine's a side issue, go ahead.
Okay, well, just thinking about the warning, I think that's a tough one, because if you get warned in period 1, and then you get warned in period 2 and period 3, like, they don't all know that they're being warned, right? And yet, you know, sometimes you just need a little nudge, knock it off, kid, and the kid's gonna be fine the rest of the time, right? So I don't know where we go with how we officially word that in policy, but I do think we need to be, I'd rather veer more towards, like, if it's out, you lose it.
That was my question. How are we gonna track? How are different classes and teachers gonna track the warnings?
There's no way.
But you're
Right.
talking about the learning environment of that class
Yeah.
period, so I'm fine with there being a warning in a class period, and if the student pulls it back out in that class period, then you go to that next step. I don't think you need to track from class period to
No.
class
No, that's
period.
just not feasible.
So the first warning really is just up to the teacher to figure out how to do that, when to do that.
And
I'll
as
tell you,
teach-
I'm sorry, at the high school level, they feel like those students have been warned.
Yeah.
So they don't
They don't
track
give a
warnings.
warning.
If the phone's out, they know that they've been
Okay.
warned, and it's like, kind of what Jennifer's saying. They've had their warning when the policy was rolled out or whatever. They said, this is your warning, basically,
Oh, I see, the actual.
if that makes sense.
Like,
communication
it's a
of the
one-time
policy is
warning.
the warning, basically.
Yes.
One of the students at Provo High even said that their teacher just starts every class by saying, I just want to remind you to put your cell phones away. And so there's just this kind of rolling, you know, I'm going to take attendance, take this out, start doing your starter, and please make sure your phones are put away and
And
put on do
that's
not
the warning.
disturb. And then
Yes.
that's your warning, and anything after that then becomes something that they can follow up with consequences.
I like that.
I do want to say this just for numbers' sake too, as Paula also reported, she hasn't had to contact any parents. Now, some of her colleagues have, depending on where those students fall in their alphabet. But what'd she say? I think she said 6 to 7 phones
A day.
a day. And I don't even, and which sounded, even she was hesitant, that might even be a little high.
She said the most that they've had is about 30 in the first couple of weeks, but
Weeks of
since
school,
then,
yeah.
it's gone down.
Yeah, we're talking a half a dozen a day.
Yeah.
So, and then I think that will continue to decrease, right? So hopefully, if it's working, but.
Yeah, that's what I mean, like, it happens a few times, the kids are like, okay, I'm not gonna.
Breaking habits,
So-
you know.
And people I've talked to in other districts or whatever that have who have started implementing a cell phone policy already, that's what they said, is the kids quickly realize whether, if it's gonna be enforced, then it takes a week or two or maybe a little bit more, but they recognize quickly, but that's where it's going to be key, that everybody's on the same page, that everybody's enforcing whatever it is we put out.
And just to make note, we visited with Timpview, and it's similar kind of what's going on up there as well. We visited their administration, so, 6, 7 a day, so.
Is there anything else direction that the policy committee needs from us today?
Can I ask a question? Do we ever keep a cell phone overnight?
If a parent didn't come and pick it up, you might.
So if they were working and unable to get there?
However, if we're moving to the pouch, oh, wait, so.
That's what I was
they
gonna
would-
say. What,
the
going
second
back to your
time.
policy question, what does that look like consistency-wise with the secondary schools as far as the confiscation aspect? Are they putting them in pouches? Are we
That's a great question.
taking them to the office? Are we, because I think they're all doing something a little different with that.
Yeah,
So I think we need to address that or
And
talk about that.
if the first time it goes in a pouch and stays with them, but a second time it would need to go to the office, how do we keep track of that?
The way that they've done it in the past is that then when it's the second offense and the kid comes down to get their phone unlocked, the administrator sits down with the kid and they call the parent and they won't give the kid the phone until the parent comes in to pick it up.
Could the parent over the phone, because I'm just thinking of work schedules and equity here. If you're at a job and you can't pick up your phone at work, or, you know what I mean, like, I guess then I feel like we aren't gonna deal with students in an equitable way based on things outside of their control in terms of their home situation.
But
Like-
they're perfectly in control of it because they can keep their phone away.
That's true.
So
But could a parent call into that setting though and have that conversation and approve sending that phone home, or no? They have to?
I would say no, because the kid has already had their phone confiscated one time. That phone call has already gone home to the parent. The parent is already aware that the student is having an issue. And they need to be communicating with them like, look, I can't come and get your phone. So next time this happens, the administrator's keeping your phone and they'll lock it up overnight until you can come in and get it. I mean, we had that situation at Midvale Middle where we would confiscate a phone and our parents couldn't always come in, and sometimes we had the phone for a couple of days. That kid never did that again, like ever. That never happened. Like, you would never have a repeat incident.
Do we have a liability while we have that phone?
Yes, so you would wanna lock it in your
Okay.
safe, yeah, for sure, absolutely. You don't wanna just leave it in your top drawer, desk. You would wanna make sure you have a place where you can secure it.
Gina?
So if I'm looking at the consequences for violations, so are we talking about taking off the first offense and training our teachers to say at the beginning of class, this is your reminder to put your phones away, which then puts the first offense being, putting the cell phone in a pouch, right? And then the student has to have it unlocked, but the parents are also notified, correct?
Yep.
And then the third offense would be the parents have to come pick up the phone.
Second.
Yes, sorry, second offense.
Yeah.
Sorry, I shifted it and then didn't. And then the second offense would be the parents come and pick up the phone. So does that then include, because here we have fourth offense, and we did get an email from a parent that I thought was very, like, move it all up, but I think this actually then moves that up, correct? So we would have, they need to come in to pick up the phone, and then the whatever we're at, third offense would be, they have to have a meeting. Is that correct? Am I looking, okay.
All right, so if board members, after we're done right now, you think of anything else, just contact our policy committee board members so that they can talk about that on Monday. And then we'll have a draft for our October 8th meeting. And Wendy, is there anything else you want to say about the process from there?
We're planning to have a parent committee meeting as long as we get that draft policy ready to go by October 8th on October 9th, with parents and teachers and principals to just get their feedback on that. So we're putting that together right now.
It sounds like we're talking about, in terms of a phone being confiscated, putting it in a pouch and leaving it with a student. If we are, do we know about the cost of that? I feel like before we decide to go that way in a policy, we should maybe have a little more data
We can make
around
sure we have that
what
information
that
for
would
Monday.
cost.
And they are allocating a little bit of money, or they're attempting to allocate some money for the legislation,
Yep,
right? That we
that's
can maybe
correct.
use that for.
I'm gonna play, just thinking of kids. They're very crafty on their Chromebooks to get around all of Chad's, he's gone, stuff.
They
Like
are.
firewalls, so you'll put up a firewall and then 2 seconds later, Kate probably knows more too about this, but these pouches. How
Hear about it.
easy are these pouches for kids to destroy and get their phones back out?
Yeah, 'cause then that's
I don't,
another level.
I haven't heard about issues with that, but I'm sure somebody will figure it out, but then that would go into a consequence in and of itself, right? Like, so now you're almost verging on insubordination because you're fighting against a consequence that's come. You need to accept that consequence and work within the rules and parameters of it, so.
I would guess that since it's not something that everybody has to have every day, that it's just if your phone gets taken away, that they're less likely to
Yeah.
looked all that up and gone to the efforts that might need to happen. So
Just wouldn't put it past kids to
No,
figure it
I
out.
think you're fine, I think you're smart.
But they'd probably have to do it in passing periods, so.
They might not have enough time.
all right, okay, let's go ahead and move on. We already did item C2 earlier this morning, so anyone who just joined us online and was so excited about our boundary and feasibility study update, you can go back to this morning's meeting after our policies. We'll go to C3, our Citizens Committee. So at our last meeting, we talked about that we would like a Citizens Committee, and Terry and I volunteered to put together a proposal, which we sent to the board members earlier this week, but I think we'll just kind of quickly go over it. First of all, we had called it a Citizens Advisory Committee. There was a little suggestion of maybe we want a different name, so we've got a couple that have already been brainstormed as options, but when I'm done going through everything, if people have other ideas for names, we can work on that together. We thought through, we're gonna need some district staff as part of it to inform and to help facilitate things, to arrange the experts that would need to be there for our committee members. Board members would not be in attendance at this meeting or with this committee. And then our communications team, we'd need someone there as well so that they can stay up to date and give updates to our community about what our committee is doing. We would set some norms for the committee, and we can make a document for that they can go over and have access to, and even get emailed ahead of time. We are thinking about 20 or so total committee members, one person from each elementary boundary, and to find that person, we can have, well, let me go over that in a second. So then we'll also have community members, such as people from different community groups that we could look at, some business owners, things like that. We're thinking of having an application. And so we'd open it up that we'd advertise through our channels to anybody that you can be a part of this, please apply. But at the same time, I think it'd be helpful to have our principals, our PTA and school community council leaders to be aware of it, and that they could recommend to certain people, I think you should apply. This would be a good thing for you to be a part of. And we would have them on the application, just, give their basic kind of demographic type info, and then write a paragraph about why they want to serve, how they're going to represent their community as part of it, and that they understand the time commitment for it. We would need to have a group, which we're recommending a few board members and some district staff that would read those applications and select who those committee members are going to be. And then with the people who weren't selected, we then have a pool of names so that if we need a new committee formed with parents or community members, we've already got some names ready to go. Or if someone can't fill their full, we're suggesting it's a 2-year commitment. If they move after a year or something, then we've got some other ideas of people that could represent that elementary boundary or whatever it might be. So we are suggesting that they meet monthly. At least for now, we've got a lot going on and a lot of things to get through. But when there are downtimes, whether it's summer or we just don't have as many big issues, then that we don't need to hold a meeting when we don't need a meeting. We debated for a while on the time of day. Terry, do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, we picked lunchtime because, you know,
Could make
The-
people come with food.
right? Yeah, food's a good motivator. Unless people, but then it kind of limits people who work, they would have to work in Provo to be able to come. And then, or at least close by. If we did evenings, then, you know, people who have commitments in the evenings couldn't come, so.
We're also trying to think about our staff too.
Yeah.
We
it's-
already have a lot of evening commitments for them.
Yeah, so it might be easier to have staff do it at lunchtime and they can eat their lunch at the same time. So that's why we kind of settled on it because of staff and.
Yeah.
And then we picked, Wednesday or Thursday seems like an easier day of the week since board meetings are usually Tuesdays and that seemed easier.
So what we would do is we'd pick one of those, maybe work with Wendy and stuff on that, and when we advertise, we would have like, this is when our meetings are gonna be, so people know what they would be committing to ahead of time. Right?
Yeah.
And then, we also got this idea from a class Terry and I went to at NSBA, but as part of their commitment, besides their regular meetings where they're learning, kind of when they get to a point where they've formed some ideas about giving us some feedback and things, they would take it to some community open houses where community members could come learn about the issue directly from the committee members themselves. And we can get feedback from a broader community, but then also that broader community can hear from their peers about this issue, not just the communications that have been coming directly from the district about it. So, we were thinking we could, if we're good today, if we can finalize stuff today, that we could start having applications and advertising the first week of October, have them due right before fall break. Then right after fall break, we would read through those applications and select the members, and then we could start with the first week of November with a meeting that week and start with our first important topic we feel is the Timpview and Dixon rebuilds. And then by the time we're kind of done with that topic, it'll be time to be talking about the boundary and feasibility study, things that have been coming in, and go from there. So, anything else you wanted to add?
Well, since we met, I sent the email with the link to how the city does their boards, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. What if, not just for this committee, but, I mean, after going to finance committee, they need, and then the next agenda item for you, what if we just have one big application, the way the city does it, and then you fill it out, and then you can click on which committees you want to participate
Be
in.
considered for it, yeah.
And, yeah, and if there's just one link to go to, you can just fill it out, and you can write your little paragraph about, if you wanna join 5 different committees, you can, you know, write a sentence for each committee that you want to join. And then I had a thought about term limits, specifically for this committee. As we're getting started, maybe half of them are only on it for a year and the other half are on for 2 years so that it alternates.
Kind of how they do on sex ed.
So,
Yeah.
right, so if someone's able to do it right now for 1 year, they could, then that would actually set us up to
Yeah.
have people not all changing out at the exact same time.
Yeah.
So we
Right.
always have some people on the committee that have been there a little bit,
Yeah.
know what's.
And that
The
brings up,
history.
like, sex ed and all the other committees that are required, sometimes by law, they can, then that's less work
Yes.
for principals if we just have one application
form.
process.
Great idea.
That's great.
All right, feedback from the rest of the board on this, anything to tweak? Let's start with that and we'll get to the name last, how about that? Okay, Gina?
So I know that we won't be at those meetings, which I think is good, right? The board members, I did have some input that previous superintendents attended some of our advisory type of committees, and they some people felt like the superintendent put their finger on the scale. So where are we with that? So just having some assistant superintendents do, I don't know, I'm just throwing
Great
it out there.
So I think when we say a staff member would be there, I think, depending on what the issue might be, that might be different. Like for the Dixon Timpview question, right? It might be one person that Wendy says, hey, this out of our team, this is the best person to head that up, and that person would be there. But I was not thinking that Wendy would be there either.
She has other things to do.
Yeah, she's got plenty of other
What?
stuff to do, right?
No, she doesn't.
And then when we change topics and give them a scope for something else, and we do want to give them a scope, like this is what we want you guys to
Yeah,
study
in
and
the-
why and what we want to hear back
In
from
the
you.
class that we attended, they made it very clear, they had a directive from the board. The board had a question, they need an answer, and the committee is supposed to answer it.
Mhm.
So they're not just supposed to go out and do whatever they want.
Yeah, yeah. So
They are directed from the board
we
on
would
what to
determine
do.
that ahead of time, send it to them, right? And then that staff person might change for the next question, right? But it would still not be any of Wendy or us there, but then we're gonna get updates and reports
And there
from
was
that
another
committee.
thing they mentioned in the class was not just the current board, but no former board members are allowed on the committee either.
Well, I think
What-
that's up to
I
us.
was
Actually, one of the
curious
classes I went
why.
to, they did have former board
Because
members on
the
purpose.
committee tended to go to that board member and treat them as if they were currently on the board and ask, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was better that no former board members were ever on it.
I don't know that we have any that would want to. All right, other feedback or questions about, good with the, kind of the feel of this, Gina?
You guys did some good work on this. I appreciate all the work you did. I do like the city's application. From what I can see, I'm not gonna fill it out because I don't want to serve on another thing. But it looks, I think that looks good. I do think this is something that would be a value add to the district. My question is for Wendy. I feel like we keep giving directives to you and your staff. Is this something that you guys feel would be helpful in your jobs?
I think if it's gonna be helpful for you guys, then it's helpful for us, to facilitate that. I think the concern that I would have from this is that sometimes when we allow people to have feedback and we form a committee and they're running open houses, they begin to think that they make policy. So I think some roles and responsibilities have to be really clearly laid out as to what that looks like, because I think it could end up, there could be a situation where it could create more issues than it solves as a result of that, so.
And one of the biggest norms is that this is an advisory role. This is not
Right.
like telling
But
us what
again,
to do.
I'm just gonna use the neighborhood program, that they have to make sure that they're very specific that this is not an elected position, that this is, like, this has been a problem with how the cities kind of turn things over, because some people felt like I was elected by my neighbors to be my neighborhood chair, and we no longer, it's a different program,
They had issues with developers, yeah, and that's why they had to change the program. Because the developers felt like they had to get approval from the neighbors instead of the city council and the planning commission.
right, but that could, I just don't want this
Yeah.
advisory committee to be the same direction. Like, we do want to get good input from them, so, but they really don't have any authority. Does
So
that make
clarity
sense?
around
I'm gonna
role
add
and
that
scope
into
would be
our,
good, yeah.
Into our norms to just clarify that.
We can have a pledge at the beginning where they pledge allegiance to not become tyrants. Maybe we should also have that pledge.
Do we take that pledge? Just checking. And then my one question was just around with the meetings, would someone be able to attend a meeting virtually if needed? If so, then, you know, like, I would think it might be challenging if they only attended virtually. Do you know what I'm saying? But, so if it were an exception, they're traveling or whatever for their work, versus I'd like to be on this committee, I know I'll never go in person.
Yeah.
I'll only attend virtually.
But maybe we don't even need to dive into those things, they'll work out. I just was wondering what your
Yeah.
thoughts were about
We
virtual
didn't talk about
There-
that.
committee
One of the things
participation.
that I did mention was like, the committee needs to decide who's gonna be their own co-chairs. That shouldn't be us, that should be them.
Yeah, they'll.
And that could be one of those things that they can
work
just
out
co-chairs
how
work
effective
out.
they are. Got it.
address if it comes up.
Sure.
Yep.
Okay.
So then would it be the co-chairs who then kind of generate a report from these meetings to give to us? Is that how that process would work?
Yeah,
Like
do
how
you
does,
get
how does the
information?
feedback happen, right? Like if we're not there, they'll just write it
Because
up or we just have a conversation?
That's great.
Yeah,
question.
if there's no feedback, then there's not really a purpose.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, thinking through of how this is really gonna be helpful to us as a board. Just if we're getting more information from a broader group of people, is it, I think the
How do
open
we
houses
get that
seems like an actual kind of way of communicating out, helping us communicate out needs or project goals, whatnot. So I guess, I'm curious, how we'll
Yeah.
get the information and then what we'll do with that information.
That is a great question of who gives us the report. Is it the co-chairs? Is it the staff
Is it
member
just
that's
notes? Yeah.
there, right?
And how do we
Um,
give them information?
Yeah. So
Right,
what,
to the staff
what
member, I
the
guess,
co-chair's
depending on the
gonna say with the help of the staff is at the end of every meeting, like, okay, what information do we need for our next, like between this meeting and next meeting so that we can keep moving forward on that? And they'll work together, and then that staff member would come back to the right district people and say, this is what they're looking for, right?
Yeah.
So I think we would just get more broad reports at that point of, here's generally what they're talking about, they're moving forward, we think by next month they'll be ready to do this, right? And then when they're getting towards the end of being ready to give us some responses to the scope we've given them, right?
The question, I
Then-
guess we've asked them a question.
then that's when we'll get like the report, is this is what they've kind of come to.
The conclusion
for this.
or the.
Is,
Yeah.
I know you're saying on here monthly, but is that too frequent?
I was just gonna,
Yeah, I
that
was
would be
wondering
my
about
big
that
concern,
also.
is I feel like
I-
it should be every other month.
That's more where I'm leaning, just because this is a non-paid position. We're asking people to do this. I just feel like it's a big time commitment for a lot of these people, time commitment for whoever's gonna lead it in staff. And a lot of times we have, I would prefer that it would be every other month. It's
It
too
might also
frequent.
depend on the topic too.
Yeah, but
We don't know what we're gonna need them to do in the future.
I think we landed on monthly for now, just because looking at those two issues I brought up, like, if they only meet November and January and March, like, to get through figuring out Timpview Dixon and then to get to the feasibility, like, I don't know, but Gina, what do you think?
I've seen the city posting, like, they have their committees, right? And I've seen posted quite often, no meeting this month, right? So if there's nothing, then let's just cancel the meeting within a certain amount of time. So I keep it monthly, because like cell phone policy, if they didn't meet this month and we wanted cell phone policy feedback, I guess we could always just call it in. If it was every other month, we could just call it in, but I feel like we could also cancel meetings. And if there are no items that the board wants feedback on, then they don't have to come.
And I get it, that we have two big things that are coming up this year, but I just, if we're gonna write this up like as a policy or something, I don't know, like.
Well,
Like, when
I
I'm-
think it's
you know.
easier to say, this is the expectation, and then, oh, we canceled a meeting, and they're all like, woo-hoo, right? Rather
Yeah.
than, okay, now we're gonna squeeze 5 things into this meeting and make it longer than we planned, or, I don't know. But I understand your concern, so but it's also hard to say every 6 weeks. It's harder to plan. Meg?
So just looking at like the first topic, Timpview and Dixon, like example-wise, what are we asking them, like, because Timpview, we kind of are moving in a direction of, we're looking into doing this the next phase, once we're done with this phase, getting our architecture plans, is it just cost, just fund? like
How are
we're
we gonna fund it and get community support, right?
That's something that
Okay.
we would need to decide in an agenda item.
Sure, okay.
Yeah.
Because it
So,
seems
but
like
that's
some
what,
things are
that's what we
decided,
would want
and so,
their
like, what
input
are
on,
we-
right? Is like, there's a strategy, a plan, how are we going to accomplish meeting both of these needs, right? In a cohesive way.
Well, I think,
Are there lots of options to do that outside of a bond?
Gina?
well, I think also just, I don't know what I was gonna say.
Okay.
This
All
is
right.
happening a lot
While
today.
you're thinking about that, any feedback on what we call this? Is it-
Can I
Yes,
express one other
Wendy.
concern? My other concern is when you're giving a group of individuals that are not elected officials that technically do not represent the district, the power to communicate on behalf of the district out in community meetings, I have real concerns about that. Because they get to create whatever narrative of Provo City School District they want to, and for us to reel that narrative back in
Should we just
and
take that one off then?
that would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I agree with that.
That that stresses me
100%.
out.
So the one that I went to, where they had the citizens helping out, they just showed up to the meeting that the district was putting on.
That's great.
And answered questions.
I'm on board with that 100%.
But not having them run the meeting.
Run the meeting, yeah,
Yes.
because then they're running the narrative of Provo City School District, so.
And they can also go off the rails if they're trying to make decisions or decide something about how to bond or when to bond. That's problematic on the finance side
Yeah,
because
that's
that
what
might
I'm kinda
not be able to happen, or they might be making decisions that are just not feasible. Or thinking that their decisions are going to really decide what our decisions are gonna be, and I would worry about giving them that much power on that.
Okay, so I'm just, in my notes here, which is not showing up there, just that they're participating in community open houses that are run by the district,
That'd be
that
great.
they're gonna be there, right?
Yeah, if available.
Yeah.
Well, unless that's one of your norms, it's part of the application. that-
Well, we probably wouldn't need all 20 of them to show up, so, but we can just, yeah. But we might also do like 4 total around the district, so they could each come to one or something, right? So, all right, Citizens Advisory Committee, Community Connections Committee, Community Steering Committee, any other ideas? What do we like to call it?
Like advisory, but I'm also not.
What about community advisory?
So the reason that we want to avoid advisory is because of past
Oh,
committees
okay.
where we've had facility advisory committees and it has a really bad connotation for some members of the community, so that's why we steered away in this particular instance where we're really generating that community input to move away from that. That was the recommendation from district leadership.
I agree, that's my area.
So what is your area you want us to call it, Gina?
You are only a volunteer, you have no power, we just want your opinion, committee.
Wow.
Kind of explains it. Actually, I don't have any good input. I had a kid thrown up this morning, so my brain is somewhere else.
Rebecca Nielsen and I liked the CCC because we're historians and we like to remember the Civilian Conservation Corps, and this is the Community Connections Committee, but that's because we're kind of nerdy, so.
Give it to them, do it.
Right, then you could really call it C cubed.
The CQ.
Yes, I like that.
Oh, wow.
I will admit that I already had that thought. I was already gonna call it C cubed.
I
like
see.
it. I
Let's
think it's
go
great.
with it.
Let's do it, yeah.
Community Connections?
Okay.
That's my, how I might just refer to it, the Community Connections. Drop the committee. But
We don't,
we'll
probably don't wanna
officially-
call it the CCC. It sounds too much like another organization.
I guess
Yeah.
it
That's
does.
true, it kind of does.
Same sound, but
It
just.
does feel like if I guess it does, though, to me, kind of a slightly different purpose, and maybe that is the purpose, but community connections, I feel like is like out
Connecting,
being friendly and bringing people in, and so that, like,
Then
that's an
just call it
implication, but you can
C-cubed.
clear it,
Yeah.
you can clarify that, I guess, if you will. But
Could
if
it
I'm
be-
like, do I want to serve on the community connections committee? Actually, no,
Community Feedback Committee?
I don't
Or
know.
Community Information Committee, I
I
don't
mean,
know.
some people do, will be thrilled to serve on that, I'm not saying they won't, but if that's the title, let's just make sure our description, though, is clear around what the community is doing, because I think that
I
will
think
bring out a different group of.
Community input?
Feedback.
Well, do you
Feedback
want to
is
go
a
back
good
to
word.
the steering option?
But
Community
steering
Oh,
kind of
that
implies that
implies that
they're
they're
in
in
charge
charge.
of
Never mind.
decisions, right?
Community
Input?
Opinion Committee?
Community input?
Community input committee? Community feedback.
No, you're right, CCC is better than those, so leave it.
Okay,
Leave it.
well, we can move forward on this and still in the next week or two, if people have good name suggestions, we can adjust it before we send things out. So I don't think we need to spend much more time on it.
Well, I'm just thinking, we could look at it as, we're trying to connect the work that's happening in the district around topics, we're connecting that work with the community.
Okay, that, yeah.
And we're serving you food, and
Yeah.
food always connects people.
Yeah.
It works for the Student Advisory Committee.
Yeah, those Centennial kids that one time.
Oh, yeah.
That's
They're
right.
all
All
they're
about
like,
the
if you
food."
want me to come, you just feed me. I'll be there.
And have fun.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go to our next item, which is the Parent Advisory Group's proposal.
Do you want to just go to lunch
Sure.
first?
Do lunch and then put that in for our
Oh, it's
afternoon?
not here yet? Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay.
well then,
Perfect start.
go for it, Wendy.
All right. This one I did call the Parent Advisory Committee because this is what we have called it in the past. So I tried, I'm kind of a wordy person. I know you guys haven't realized that yet, so I probably need to wordsmith this down and make it a little less complex. But the way in which this committee, I feel like, would be very different from the committee we just talked about is this would be in place of our Latinx parent committee, our LGBTQ plus parent committee, and any of these advisory committees that have really represented specific demographic groups within our district. And so we want to acknowledge that we already have many ways in which our parents can engage, and that's kind of what the first paragraph talks about. And that in the past, we have put forth significant effort to ensure that all members of our community have access to district level leadership and information in an environment that is safe and that honors their unique experiences and background. And so traditionally, they've been specifically oriented to these populations that are often underrepresented. And we've done that to ensure that all voices are heard. But in light of recent legislation, we have a need to shift the makeup of our parent advisory groups so that they are not organized exclusively by ethnicity, race, gender expression or identity, immigrant status, religion, or heritage. So that's what this proposal is seeking to do, to preserve the goodwill that has already been created by past leaders and to ensure that we continue to hear all voices as we accomplish our mission to welcome, educate, and inspire our students and families. So I put here just some bullet points about how this committee is different, and it really is a way for parents to express to us the experiences that their students are having and providing that parent perspective in our schools. So, for example, there are certain types of students that sometimes experience greater discrimination or harassment, and so what are the structures that are happening in schools that are actually contributing to that because of the way in which our systems are set up that we might not otherwise see being individuals in positions of power, or that those parents sometimes don't know how to navigate the educational bureaucracy to really express that with us. And then this information would then be used to inform district and school-based leaders as to specific steps as we were trying to create our positive school cultures. And so it really is going to be about parents who have students that are in our schools. And that they might not be able to contribute the amount of time that is required through a PTA commitment or that's required through school community council. Maybe they don't have the social capital to get elected into a school community council, but they really want to participate and let us know what's going well and what we could improve upon. And then I just listed out the goals that they're connected directly to our strategic plan, particularly to priority 2 of wellness and safety, where we're trying to increase the number of students and families who feel that our schools and district provide welcoming and supportive environments. And that one of our strategies actually in the strategic plan says that we will create specific district-wide committees for families and employees to access high levels of leadership. And that our second goal is to reduce the number of major offenses tied to bullying, harassment, discrimination, school safety, and physical aggression. And we feel like that this is giving us some information in addition to those statistics about what is occurring. So the structure, how are the parents selected? We did it, I thought, an application process. This is kind of, I love Terry's idea about the parents could then fill out which committees they wanted to be a part of, thank goodness, so we don't have to fill out multiple applications. And then the Board of Education and superintendent could select the parents, or you could have district leadership, whoever you want. Like, this is a draft, so whoever the individuals are. We would want half of the representation to come from elementary, half to come from secondary, half to come from the Provo feeder, and half to come from the Timpview feeder. I did not put the number on there. I feel like that's something I'd like some feedback about. I don't know what that should look like. I feel like sometimes when the group gets too big, particularly people that are traditionally marginalized get really quiet in those instances. And so sometimes a smaller group creates a safer space. We would ensure that the parent committee reflects as closely as possible the demographics and makeup of the students in the Provo City School District. So if we have this percentage of Hispanic students, we want to see that representation. If we have this percentage of immigrant students, we would want to, as much as we can. We know that that's not always going to be possible, but I think just trying to be, and we know that we have a lot of Caucasian students, so we want to make sure that we have parents of our Caucasian students that are represented. So we could make applications available in Spanish and explaining the purpose of the committee, and then determining locations so that people had accessibility. That would be a concern as well. Parents seeking to serve on this committee would have to agree to a code of conduct and norms guided by the Dignity Index specifically for interactions on the committee. We anticipate having hard conversations and receiving tough feedback, and we seek to listen and understand and problem solve together to make our district the best it can be. We have different perspectives, but all members must recognize that these different perspectives lead to more creative and productive problem solving. So they need to know that coming in, that that's the purpose of this committee. And if they don't like hanging out with people who have different perspectives, this probably isn't the committee they should apply to be a part of. And then I put on there 2-year time period, but also want to make sure that they have a child that's enrolled. So if they have a senior, then when their senior graduates, they would move off of the committee, even if they had not served their 2-year term, or if they unenroll from the schools and do something else, they wouldn't continue. This really is about our parents. And then I put the committee would meet once each quarter. I didn't know how often, Meg, maybe you can speak to this, how often the parent advisory committees were meeting. Were they meeting monthly?
I think they were meeting monthly, yeah.
So we could do it every other month. I was just throwing this out there, so.
It really
Quarterly's a good start. I don't know,
I think quarterly is a good start. There were some committees that were meeting monthly, and if we need to increase it, we can, but I think most of them were not
The
meeting
ones that,
monthly.
yeah, they weren't all functioning, yeah.
And then just putting the responsibilities, they serve as in an advisory capacity. We often have information about specific schools and situations. This will help us to identify, along with our data, trends and patterns that are emerging so that we can adjust our systems and address problems more directly. And the Board of Education and district leadership would bring concerns or questions, seeking feedback. Committee members would then share that information with other parents, and then they could seek clarification, problem solving, like, I heard this happen, tell me, help us understand why that's occurring. And so anyway, our next steps would be to take this to district leadership, school-based leadership, share it with parents or community members, especially those that have been involved in advisory groups. We could share it with our student advisory council, create the application process. And I put in place no later than February 1st because I'm just really trying to look at our capacity and trying to be a little understanding of that. But also, I didn't know who you want from district leadership. Do we want some of our just directors to lead this? Do we want, do board members want to serve on this? Do we want to rotate? And I didn't know what that had looked like in the past on many of these. I like the idea of giving parents, building that trust with parents so they have access to, they don't always have access to the highest levels. They don't know that, you know, some parents know, hey, I know this board member, I can call them and tell them what's going on, and then all of a sudden their issue gets raised to the highest level. Many of our parents, that isn't their world, and so does this give them an opportunity to have that same access that some parents do have? So anyway, I promised I would have a proposal, so that's what I got. Do you have lunch? Yes. Okay, well, we can talk about it after if you want to adjourn or if you want to talk about it now.
We're on it. Do we have any questions,
I
feedback
was
for
just
Wendy?
gonna say, with the code of conduct and using dignity index, we shouldn't just use it for this committee, but for like all of the committees.
Terry and I had actually talked about a dignity index.
Yeah, I
for
saw
ours
that.
too, yeah.
Just like our MO, right?
Gina?
I love this. I think, thank you for the work that you put into this. I think this is a great idea, and I agree with everything you said.
Lisa?
Also, this is awesome. I love that you tied this into the strategic plan. I would love to, when we talk about this community one, put in that then,
Put in
yeah,
my
like,
notes.
tie it to the
Tie
priority and the
everything, yeah.
goal in the
Yep.
strategic
Yeah.
plan and be
I
really
thought the same.
outward-facing about that. That's really helpful to me. Also, I guess if we are gonna do one application, then maybe the trick without making it too arduous is to make sure we're clear on what the differences are in some of these things and their focus, I feel like. But I this weekend I tried to read actually through House Bill 261 again, just to try to understand it. And one of the things I liked that's in there is that we can share and celebrate and educate about different cultures and groups of people and their experiences. And so I like the idea that we are going to continue bringing parents together who they and their students are living with their unique stories and be able to bring that to us in a way that informs the policies we make and the work we're doing anyway. So I think this is perfect. I love it.
Do you want, what board involvement do you want in this particular committee? What does that look like for you guys?
I think it's going to be important to have at least one of us there. If we're going to have access to high-level
Thank you.
people, then even though I don't necessarily consider myself a high-level person, I think it would be good for us to have, I don't know how we
So
want to do that.
Do we want to treat it like we treat our committees, where we
That's
just
what
have
I
2
wondered.
board members assigned?
Yeah.
Or do we
Yes.
want to rotate like we're doing with our student one?
I
Someone
would,
could join if they weren't on it.
Right.
Like,
I
if
would
I'm not on the
favor-
committee, I could go,
I
right?
would favor having 2 people assigned, and then, kind of like we do now, I can't make it,
Yeah.
is there anyone available who can make it? Or, here's an issue, Meg, I think that they're going to be talking about infrastructure or whatever. Meg, would you like to go in my place, or whatever? Meg sees something, she can step in. But I think having 2 people assigned will make sure someone gets there.
Because there was a board member assigned
There was.
previously, so let's just continue that.
And I think it was appreciated when a board member was in those meetings, just because it did feel like, oh, you're taking this seriously, like you
Yeah.
want to hear what we really have to say and be part of
Yes.
this.
Yeah, we're hearing the feedback real time
Yeah.
from them,
And it's,
along
it's
with the
important enough that
district
we make the time.
people, yeah. Any
Okay.
other questions for us?
No,
to
that
answer?
was just, and then I didn't know if you wanted to put this into an actual policy or if we want to just get it going and then develop the policy as we decide, as we tweak it,
Let's see how.
rather, and see how it runs and see what changes we might need to make with it. But I think the feedback I'm getting is that people want to make sure this doesn't go away, right? And so what can we do to help support that? So, but we can do that at a later time, so. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
do we have a motion to adjourn the study session?
I move we adjourn the study session.
Okay, we are adjourned. We will start our next study session at 12:30 PM.
Perfect.